Good evening, everybody. This is the Rockport Select Board meeting for Monday, March 11th, 7 o'clock in the evening, here in the Jeffrey Parker Community Room. First item of business on the agenda is approval of minutes of previous meetings, and we have several to talk about this evening. The first one is May 14th, 2018, which actually was the prior Select Board. Do we have any motion on that one from the ones who can make a motion?
I make a motion we accept the minutes from Monday, May 14th, 2018.
Is there a second?
Yes,
I take that as a second.
correct.
Okay. Any discussion? And again, this is the prior select board, so.
We abstain.
And Jeff will have to abstain. If no discussion, all in favor of the motion? Any approved, any opposed, and abstaining? So that's a 3-0-2 vote. The next set is May 21st. That was an executive session, and again, that's the prior select board. Entertain a motion on these.
Make a motion to approve the executive session from May 22nd, 2018.
Second.
21st.
May 21st,
Second.
2018.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? Doug?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
Any
getting
opposed?
ready to
No,
do the
and
next one.
two abstain. 3-0-2 again, those stand approved. Okay, July 23rd, special meeting minutes. And this is all, actually, I was, look at this, it says present. Apparently Deb and I were absent for this meeting. So, remember that.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of Monday, July 23rd, 2018.
I second.
Any discussion on these minutes? If not, all in favor of approving? That's 3. Any opposed and abstaining? 2 of us. So 3-0-2. Deb abstaining on that one. Okay, Thursday, February 7th, more recent, and we were all here for that one. A motion on those minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of February 7th, 2019.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? This was the evening that we appointed the search committee. If not, all in favor? Vote.
Yes, sorry.
Any opposed? 5-0. That's motion passed. And Monday, February 11th, more recent meeting. Motion on these?
I'll move that we approve the February 11th, 2019 minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded.
I'd like to have item G amended if I could.
Which item?
That's the public comment portion. It was omitted that I had asked after the donation of $150,000 if there was anything special that they wanted the money to go towards. And they indicated no, as long as it went towards the building of a library. So if that could be added in there, that would be great.
Then there was one other
I had a question too, but
motion that I wanted to look at if I can find it here. On page 4, the very top of the page, it says Jeffrey Hamilton moved to accept the appoint. I think it should just be moved to appoint. Yeah. Strike accept and the. And then Doug, you said you had something?
yeah, and it's good because Jason's here tonight about the West Rockport Fire Station. We had this discussion about it, and at one point, Jason pointed out that we have $130,000 sitting in the bond bank, and we have to use it by this summer or we lose it. I don't quite remember how that all flushed out in the end. Will we be using that money
That's the plan, yeah, is to,
to do the site
As I
work?
recall,
To
the
do some of the
discussion was
site
to
work?
do some site work.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
That would have to be done at
Yep.
some point anyway.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Any further comments, questions on these minutes? If not, all in favor of the motion with the amendments noted? Any opposed? No? Okay, 5-0. Okay, on to the manager's report, which we have in front of us and has been published locally. Do we have any,
Paper and on.
anything else, anything you want to
Well,
particularly highlight, Rick?
the continuing saga of the generator, they came today and installed all of the plumbing and tank, the tank is all filled with propane and connected, so now all they have to do is come in and do the startup and testing, and we're good to go.
Do we have any other questions on the report for Rick?
Under the fire department, the very last line, well, not quite sure what that is meant to read. Discussed creating a strike team to assist all towns in the community during larger scale events and installed a new Knox box on C Street that brings our total to private homes and 11 commercial properties.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're,
Right here.
Yeah, at the very end of the, it is a little confusing.
yeah,
Just wasn't quite sure what it meant.
oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Is that English?
Yes, it is. I don't, the chief is here, which is, thankfully, the chief is here. He can explain the strike team, what it does, but we have this thing with Knox boxes that we've installed. They're basically, it's a locked box that you can install on the buildings that the fire department has access to with one single key. And so there's one at the town office, there's one here. Is inside?
Right, you walk out this door on
You're
the
right.
left.
So there's these boxes that are located all around town. There's 11 commercial properties and homes that have them currently. And
There's 11 private residents and I think 14 now commercial.
commercial properties.
Okay, so it's 11 private homes and 14 commercial.
Okay.
So instead of having to break a window, there's a key outside in a metal box, and the fire department has a special key to open it.
How do you spell Knox box?
Knox. Or K-N-O-X and then B-O-X.
No, that's there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
How do the private homes have these, or how come some have them, or how did they find out about it, or?
Almost all of them are private residents that.
Jason, would you come up to the mic, so the folks at home can hear you? This might be something that homeowners would be interested in.
Yeah.
Most of the homes that have them are seasonal families that aren't here in the winter. When alarms come in, when we go to investigate, we prefer not to have to break and enter to investigate. So what we do is we try to sell the point that this Knox box for a one-time purchase of $329 can be mounted to somewhere that's, secure, behind a garage, somewhere we have access to that's not, visible to, friends and family, public eye. And then what you do is you put your master key or master keys in there with any alarm information. So if there is a call there at 2 in the morning through, anytime, we have access to get into that building and do a complete check. We have a few RPs, people that watch homes that are older that don't want to get up between 10 and 6 in the morning. So they've already said we won't show up. So we sold it to a lot of different persons in the community. A lot of the businesses right around the harbor area have gone with this. All the schools have them now.
Town office has it. Jason, how do
All
you?
town buildings have them.
Yeah, all the town buildings have them. And how do you determine, you have in the truck or something, it tells, there's
We
a
have two-
locator that tells you where the
We have a
Knox box-
master list that's laminated that I update. Whenever
Right.
we get a new one, we update it. It just gives the address, if there's a contact, who to reach out to say, hey, listen, you had an alarm, we've been in your home. Excuse me. On 2 of the trucks, we have a box with a keypad. The key is in there. It's a visible key. You can see it. It's turned and locked. The only way to open that is each firefighter has their own personal code. When that code's entered, the key's unlocked and a blue light flashes until the key's re-entered. That's tracked internally, so if there was ever any question on the keys being removed, you can plug it in and download to show that the key was removed at this time by this person and, reinstalled.
Is that something you'd like to promote for more buildings, or is it,
With the amount of alarms and stuff that we go to with the amount of seasonal, it's a huge help to us. I mean, Chief Farley and my talk might run into the same thing where we have a lot of seasonal. I know definitely Chief Farley does, where we get there and there's nobody there this time of year. Again, I'd prefer not to take a door or a window to go investigate. I don't feel comfortable sometimes walking around a house that's massive and you can't see inside. And we have one RP that drives an hour and a half away. So that means myself or someone has to sit there for an hour and a half to wait for them to get there to let us into the building. So, you know, we try to sell it on that, you know, it's $329 once, or if we had to, you know, your $6,000 front mahogany custom-built door.
That's why they give you a fire axe.
Yeah, right, well, he's trying to avoid that if he can help it.
Right.
So, I mean, we have iPads in every truck now? Is that what we have, or a laptop?
One of the older ones doesn't have them, but the
Right.
newer trucks do, yes.
But if you go to a call, is that, you know, say you start getting 200 or 300 of these things with them all located in different locations, you know, that somehow that you can.
Well, on I Am
something-
Responding,
Okay, there you go.
I Am Responding, which pops up on our phones as well as the iPads. Chris,
We'll
do you
come
have
up
the
with
Knox
that.
Camden as well. Do you have Knox boxes anymore? I Am Responding, when the map pops up on our iPads, there's a little symbol for the Knox box. It's a red K.
Oh, and then the person, then you know.
So
to
you'll
go
look on the map and see the house that you're at has a Knox box.
And then you look at the list to find out where the Knox box is, and,
Yeah, most of the people, I mean, we know where most of them are. We go over the list every so
Yep.
often on where they're located.
but if we started getting 200 of them, it would be a longer list.
It's a huge advantage to us. I
Right,
mean,
yeah.
Again, we go to a lot of false alarms where there's no one that shows up.
Yeah, the fire department isn't like that, they like breaking the door or breaking the window. I mean, that's the last thing they want to be doing, but.
I mean, we're installing one at a certain location that I won't go over that has a long driveway with a big gate. They're only here for several weeks out of the year, and they just purchased one. And they're gonna be installing it as soon as the ground allows them to put things in around the gate so that we can open the gate to get in this long driveway to a home.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I had a couple of things. One on the vacancy in the town clerk's office. Is there a date anticipated for having that filled?
No, we have interviews, the final interviews are Wednesday?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Tomorrow, there's two more interviews. We thought we were down to one candidate, and that candidate,
So probably by the end of the month, then.
yeah,
Good.
my hope is, from my understanding is that we had three really good quality candidates, so.
My next one was, we've hired somebody at the highway department.
Public Works, yes, yep.
Have you ever brought them in before us? I mean,
No, we don't typically bring everybody in.
oh, if you're going to embarrass the police, you may as well embarrass the highway. I mean, I don't even know who it is. Yeah, I mean, you haven't even told us that I
Mike.
know of, so.
Mike, his last name escapes me. He's on, he actually is on the Midcoast Solid Waste Board. Deb.
Mike Brown?
Mike Brown, there you go.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, points.
That's Mike Brown. We have too many Mikes in
Wait a
Public
minute.
Works, now there's about
That's
five.
who it is?
Yeah.
You're saying?
Yeah.
Oh.
I have a question in the town clerk section here. We sent out 25 foreclosure notices who haven't paid taxes going back to 2016. Is that 25, is that an unusual number? And will that sort itself out over the next
That'll sort
month
itself
or
out.
so?
It's an average number.
Okay,
And,
all right. I just wanted to make sure this
As-
wasn't something that was going to come
well,
down
as a
the
result, we
pike,
ended
yeah.
up with only 6 properties that have not paid as of the foreclosure date. So now we've sent a redemption letter, so now they have to pay 2.5 years versus the 1 year.
And how many of those foreclosure notices? I thought I saw, 4 timeshares, okay.
When was the last
We're
time
left
we
with 3
actually
and 3.
foreclosed on a house?
Excuse me?
When was the last time we actually foreclosed on a house and sort of,
Do it very
Well,
often.
we
do
have
we own it?
well, we have
a
the.
couple
we-
of years ago, but then we
Usually you end up
resolved
doing
that
a
with.
quitclaim deed,
Back.
because the
Right.
town owns it for some short period of time, and then we deed it back to them if they pay the taxes.
But we helped with a poverty abatement on one, too.
Right.
Yep.
All right, stay tuned.
Mr. Chair, I did have a question when we get done with this portion of it, when you're ready.
Does anybody read through with the town clerk? I think so.
I just
No.
had one question. It said that you attended the Opera House Committee meeting and discussed the budget, what items need attention. Seats in the balcony, new refrigerator barrier where some seats were removed.
That was a result of of the department head report.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, right, so, I'm asking Linda, the seats that were, the barrier, we heard about during the budget process, and then, was there something wrong with the seats in the balcony?
If you go up and look at those seats, some of the covers are ripped, torn, and they are not very presentable looking for
Like, how many
representing our
seats do you
town.
know? Do you have a sense?
I went up there the other night when we had the event for Brenda, and I just glancing, there's probably a dozen.
One of the things that the hope is that with the seats that we pulled out, I can't remember, is it 20 seats we pulled out of there? About 20 seats. We'll be able to cannibalize the
Oh.
parts and get new covers made for those, and then replace the seats,
Okay.
pull the other covers.
Yep.
The other thing is that the railing has been fixed, and also, I believe, Jimmy was in on Friday afternoon, said I haven't had a chance to go up and look at it, but the railing has been fixed, and the opening in to the sound booth area has been fixed also. That's been taken care of as well.
Thanks.
Mark, did you have something?
Did we skip over the public comment portion of it? Because I know last meeting we had, there were two people that were keen on speaking publicly.
Oh, yeah, you may have.
And
You were eager to get to my report.
I don't want to have it happen again.
My apologies, yeah, and we have agenda changes to talk about too, so, my apologies. Well, we're on the town manager's report, let's finish that,
Yep.
and I'll backtrack, but
Should
my
we talk
apologies.
about streetlights at all? Oh, no, wait a minute.
That's later in the
No, no,
agenda.
Can I
never
just,
mind.
I didn't get clarity on the generator. When's that gonna be done?
Mike is scheduling the startup. It just got, the propane just got hitched up today, so as soon as Mike can schedule the startup and testing, he'll schedule that.
Before the end of the month?
Yeah, the guy is eager to get it finished so he can get paid for the final piece of it, I'm sure.
Okay, anything else for the manager? And again, I apologize for jumping ahead. So we have to go back, actually, and actually should go back through the announcements. So let's go back to B under minutes, meetings, and announcements. Right now, we have a regular select board meeting scheduled on Monday, March 25th at 7 PM, and right now, that's scheduled to talk about parking for the library situation. We probably are going to schedule one later this week as well. I haven't gotten with everybody to find the appropriate time for that, so hopefully I'll have that resolved within the next day or so, and then we'll get a notice out to everybody. It could be as late as next Monday. And then a regular select board meeting and public hearing on Monday, April 8th. Budget Committee has their meetings this week, I believe, and then the Select Board will get the budget back from them with any recommendations for next, Tuesday, March 26th. And then at that point, it'll be formulated into the articles for the warrant.
If I could, Ken, with regards to the meeting on the parking, if we could be a little super sensitive to the area neighbors and making sure that they're notified.
Yeah, we have the list. We'll
Yeah.
get something out.
Good.
Yeah.
For the 25th, you mean?
Well,
For
and
March
whenever we
25th
schedule one
and-
this
and the
week,
event.
too, or next Monday,
Yeah.
whenever it ends up being. Yeah, we'll do that. Nomination papers are available at the town office for one select board seat, 2 library committee seats, 1 school board seat, 3 budget committee seats, 3 full budget committee seats, and 1 budget committee, which is the remainder of a term, a 1-year term there. Other committee openings are shown on the agenda, and actually, we don't have too many right now, which is kind of nice for a change. Agenda changes, actually, I saw David Cocky walked in, so we don't have to make that agenda change. The only other agenda change that I would suggest to the board is that we swap under new business items C and D, so that the gentleman who's here from the streetlight company can perhaps get on his way home a little bit earlier. So if everybody's okay with that, we can do that.
Why not kick him up to after A before B?
We
Got quite a ways to drive.
That's okay with me, if it's okay with everybody else. It pushes Jason down a little bit. Those guys have to
Those
stay a
guys
little
are
bit longer.
local.
Yeah.
They'll still
Okay,
be
all
home
right.
before he is.
Take care of that, okay. Okay, public comment, and again, apologies for not doing this earlier. Public comment should be directed at issues not under discussion on this evening's agenda. Comment from the public will be welcome prior to each agenda item. Further comment granted only by permission from the board, and all public comment should be brief and to the point. Do we have anybody who wishes to make public comment this evening?
My name is Doc Wallace. I live at 226 Union Street. I was at the last workshop, and I wanted to comment, but there wasn't the provision for that, so I'd like to make my comment tonight. And I was reflecting upon the library meeting that you had with Gardy Dorsky et al. And I took exception to one of the comments that was made by one of the speakers, and that was that the board was disingenuous. And I'd just like to say for the record that I absolutely disagree with that. I think this board has been very open and transparent. In fact, they've had meetings where my wife and I have been the only ones here. So I think that in terms of a need for knowledge, I think you're certainly satisfying that. I also wanted to comment on the overage for the parking and so on. I've been the senior executive working with public boards in much larger communities than this. And I would say that, first of all, again, I think you're transparent, and on the amount, I think it's entirely within reason, particularly in view of the fact that this is a community that stepped up to contributing more than half of the entire project through voluntary subscriptions. And my goodness, if that doesn't describe the enthusiasm of a community for a project, I don't know what does. That to me is pretty incredible. We are a super sensitive abutter. We enjoy people parking in front of our house for all the events here and so on, and we don't have a problem with that. But I will say that we probably go past that little park there at the intersection of town 2 or 3 times a day, a dozen times a week. And my only comment on the park is that it's never used. I don't ever recall anybody ever walking through the park. And while it may take a bit of space away from the park, I would say that with modest expense in terms of hardscape and minimum plantings, I think that could be an absolutely gorgeous little town green. So I don't have a problem with that. Ironically, I just want to say to you, I want to chastise the board, having complimented you. I want to chastise
There's
the
the
board
but,
on the fact
well,
that,
but.
I've worked in government for so many years, and I've never seen a public body that wouldn't accept public comment at any meeting. And I think that whenever you have a public comment, it'd be my point of view, whether it's a workshop or whatever. And I know the travail that goes with working on details where the public can be a pain in the you-know-what if they come up all the time. But if you control it, and I'm probably not being controlled right now, but if you control it, I would urge the board as a matter of policy to at least have a very small portion of every meeting where the public gets a chance to be heard. And having said that, that's my piece. I also want to give a shout out to your town manager. I've only been here for 1.5 years, but I think he's done a heck of a job for you. And it's going to be tough to replace him. I'm sorry I can't participate in that. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Anybody else wishing to make public comment this evening? Okay. Well, we've already done the town manager's report.
We need to accept, as part of our consent agenda.
Consent agenda is next on the agenda. So there's only
One thing.
one item on there, having payment in lieu of taxes from Coastal Mountains Land Trust. So I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second? Go ahead.
Any further discussion on the motion? other than to thank Coastal Mountains Lands Trust for their donation. It's much appreciated. I say this every time we get a payment in lieu of taxes. It's validation for the town that these folks who are not required to pay property taxes to still feel an obligation to, or a recognition of the services that the town provides. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? That passes 5-0. Next item is unfinished business to discuss the food sovereignty ordinance. We have comments from the manager in our packet, as well as a string of emails, and the sovereignty ordinance that we have, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, is the one that was modified by town council.
Yes, yep. With some changes by Bill Napower. He caught a couple of things in there.
You know what those are?
It had to, he had one, I don't know, I can't remember, he had one reference to the citation.
Okay.
He had a citation and then the enforcement, there was an enforcement provision. He had a question about.
And everybody, Ken, that's concerned has had a chance to see this. And
I would assume so. Marcy's out there nodding her head. and
I mean,
so-
Bill's happy with the final product.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think the email chain indicated
Yep.
that it had gone through
Right.
all those folks. And I think the big modification was that the one that was originally presented to us went beyond what state statute allowed. And
Yeah.
our council said we should probably stay within what state statute allows, and that makes a lot of sense to me, not being a lawyer.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Marcy and I met, and I appreciate her coming over and meeting with me on it. And yes, the original draft out there, frankly, the original draft that I think is on the group's website, goes on for like 4 pages of, the Constitution and the right of the people and all that stuff. And so, it's not done particularly well as an ordinance. And so our ordinance, as Phil has drafted it, really tracks, it's very, very sparse, and it does exactly what it needs to do, totally tracks the statute. And the main thing is that the state I'm sure you guys read that the state legislature limited the statute to the site where the site of production. And while that doesn't help those who want to be able to sell their pickles or whatever at farm markets or at churches or, those kinds of events, the remedy is in the state legislature. So we might see this back again someday when the legislature, if and when the legislature amends it.
I think there was, Marcy may know this better, but I think there was a move at one point to try and get it amended, and it failed.
No, well, it got trapped in the, sorry, Marcy from 34 South Street, Casas. It got trapped in the budget process.
Oh, okay.
And so they are working towards an update to fix that site of production. So my only request with this is, can we add an automatic update clause to the end where it talks about authority? Because it says that, it talks about if it's deemed,
That's a good question.
so I don't know who we would ask about.
Town council, if we can
Yeah.
put language in there that
Because it wasn't the legislature that put it in, it was between the bill and the state statute. It got snuck in there somehow, and nobody knows how or why.
yeah, that's a good question. I can,
And so they were trying to fix it, but like I said, it got caught up in the budget process. And so got ditched.
And so would the amendment be a very simple amendment to
Yeah, it's the site, it's that
expand the
site of
production, or take out the site of
Right,
production?
because when we think about this ordinance, I mean, this is us, bringing things to a bake sale or the farmer's market. And if the farmer's market is a member of the MFFM, the Maine Farmers Federation Market of Markets or whatever it is, they require that their vendors all are licensed anyways. So this is like smaller farmers market, like what we have in Rockport at the State of Maine Cheese Company. Like that would be eligible for people under this food sovereignty ordinance to sell there, type of thing.
Well, personally, an automatic amendment would be a problem for me, just because, I mean, for this one, it would be fine, but for
Right.
other stuff that we don't know about and coming in the future, I think we'd be better off if we adopt this ordinance, then we have it in place and amending it for the
Yeah, and
specific
I'm
thing
happy
when
to
they
follow,
come
I
up.
mean, I'll follow it anyways, and I'll be back when and if
Yeah,
it changes.
I think that would be the
just
better
did-
way to handle that.
I prefer
personally.
that approach, because who knows is in the legislative process what
Yeah, they
will
may
actually
change something
come
that we
out.
don't want to,
Right.
we don't want to have on there, so I don't want to have that done
Yeah,
automatically.
and I'm happy to come back.
While we have you, Marcy, so otherwise you're happy with this?
I liked the simplicity of it. I thought that that was great.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier,
Yeah.
like Deb said, it's a lot easier to read, and it's very clear.
It was,
It's very clear.
I
and-
loved all of it, except for obviously the site of production is, and it was the legislators that wrote the other one, and obviously,
Yeah.
that you could see the difference between the two.
Right.
And I know that, Jeff, you had some concerns about people's health, and I did reach out to the Maine CDC, and there have been 0 cases since the first food sovereignty passed in Hope in 2011, 0 cases of anyone poisoning their neighbors. So as far as safety is concerned, we've got a really good track record for that.
No, don't even bring it up.
Are there
Okay.
any other questions or concerns about this? I know the next step would be public hearing, right? Is that where we're going?
Yeah, that would, if we go through the process, it would be public hearing, then we place it on the warrant in April.
The thing would be that if the legislature did make an amendment to it, you'd have to go back to the voters in November or June when
Right.
that happened.
Yeah, it would have to be voted again.
You'd have to do an update to it, but that's not a big deal. Once you get it passed, it's not with any ordinance, it's just an amendment to the ordinance once it gets passed.
Yeah, and the framework is already there, and that's
Right.
what's good about getting this on now, is that we got the framework there, and if we have to have an amendment, it'll be a pretty easy cut and dried process, I would think, from the sounds of what the amendment that you're suggesting, so.
Great.
Any further discussion on this item?
I move to approve the draft food sovereignty ordinance as presented for inclusion on the June 11th town meeting warrant.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's a 5-0 vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy,
Thank you.
and shout out to Phil for doing a good job on this one. Okay, under new business, we have an application for
ORC.
Ordinance Review Committee and as an alternate on the Ordinance Review Committee and the Zoning Board of Appeals from David Cockey. Now, before David, come on up, but I want to explain to the board what's happened here at Summer, and that is that one member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Zoning Board of Appeals puts somebody automatically on the Ordinance Review Committee, and they are a voting member. And the person who was doing that on the Zoning Board of Appeals has now stepped away from that. And she hasn't resigned from the zoning board, so we wouldn't see it here, but we had a note in the office that said that she didn't want to be on the Ordinance Review, as the zoning board represented the Ordinance Review Committee anymore. And I bring that up.
Remind us who that was?
Pardon me?
Remind us who that was?
Emily Lusher.
Okay.
And she couldn't make the meetings, as it turned out. But I mention that because instead of appointing David as an alternate to the Ordinance Review Committee, I think if we chose to, we could just not do that and appoint him to the Zoning Board of Appeals, whereupon he would likely become a voting member of the Ordinance Review Committee through that channel. So I broached that as a possibility to the board and to see what David wants to say about it as well.
I'm not really picky one way or the other. I mean, you know,
You might get both.
I've been to most of the Ordinance Review Committee meetings last year and this year, and, you know, folks are nice enough to listen to what I have to say. So I'm not picky one way or the other.
Yeah, as the liaison to ORC, David's been there, and has a lot of positive contributions. And ZBA is a board that we really have to get back up and running again soon, and I'm hoping that David can do that, because they haven't met for a long time. Thankfully, we haven't had a need for them, but it's a group that if you do have a need for them, they have to be ready, and right now, the readiness may not be what we would like.
Is the term to expire June 30th, 2021 for both?
I think it would be for the ZBA, because an alternate member, I'm not sure has an expiration as an alternate member, so.
So that's for the
So
ZBA.
my suggestion to the board, and you can take me up on it or not, would be to appoint to the ZBA only.
To make it cleaner.
And that way,
And then they'll
because
pick
otherwise, if he's an alternate, then he can't vote on the ORC, but if he goes in as a
Or
ZBA
you can
member,
vote
he
if,
can
you
vote.
can vote if you don't have a quorum.
That's true, if you're, somebody else isn't there, you can, but I think
if you
this,
don't
I
have
think
to.
it would be, this would be a better way to
I'm
do
not
it.
picky.
You could live with that?
Yeah, I suppose so.
But
I'm actually, my interest is more in the ordinance review committee.
Is it sort of a given fact that if you were appointed to the zoning board of appeals, you'd be the guy to?
I have no idea.
I can't imagine that they would not appoint him.
nobody else
Nobody
wants
else
it.
has stepped forward for that, so I'd be shocked. And if that was the case, then he can come back next month and we'll put him on as an alternate to the ORC
Yeah.
or whatever, so,
That's assuming the ZBA meets sometime.
yeah, true.
Oh, well,
Oh, that could be a problem. then.
Well,
The
I've
ORC
been talking to
process.
Bill Napower about that, we've got to get them to meet.
Yeah.
And now with David on board, I think that will help that as well.
Given that thought, I mean, the ORC is doing all their work now, and if the ZBA isn't gonna be meeting, you know, ORC's work's gonna be done here in another
Couple of weeks,
couple of weeks. You know, appointing him as an alternate member, does it do any harm to appoint him as an alternate member, and then the ZBA you can make him a permanent member?
It doesn't do any harm, but it doesn't really change the situation at all either.
But at least he can go and be a part of the committee.
Well, he can come and be a part of the committee anyway, he's been doing that for the last year, so.
But if there's not a quorum, he could actually vote on the committee, where if he's not an
Yeah,
alternate,
if there's-
he
I think it
won't
says
be
if
able
there's
to.
not a full number of people there.
Yeah, the alternate can then vote if there's, we can do it, whatever the board
Probably
wants to
should-
do.
I have to say, you know, in the little bit of time I've been at the ORC, I don't remember really seeing much in the way of split voting.
No, it happens once in a
much
while, but
consensus.
usually, sometimes there's one dissenter or something, but the 7 years that I've been going there, there's never been a vote that was razor thin by any means. Usually it gets all hashed out and discussed, and disagreements get figured out, and we move forward. Does anybody have any further questions for David? If
I just,
not-
you know, wanted to make a couple comments about ZBA.
Absolutely.
Which, I was on the Rochester Hills, Michigan ZBA for 9 years. A little bit different situation than here. That's a suburban city, was like 85,000 people, growing somewhat. And in the 9 years we were on it, I think I was actually wound up being chairman for 7 years. I think we had over 100 cases. It may well have been well over 100 cases. Most of which was variances. And there was few administrative appeals and some sign ordinance stuff. I went back through the minutes that are online that go back to, I think, 2009. And it was interesting with the ZBA here that if almost everything since 2009 has been the special exemptions, which got
Right.
moved with the change in ordinance to the
To the planning board.
planning board, yeah, and there were a couple cases 2009 with some oddball ones. So it doesn't look like it's a very active group, but maybe life will change.
Well, and it was 15 or so years ago when we had a lot of subdivisions
Yeah.
coming, and it was more active at that time, and also prior staff at the, one of the reasons it doesn't have a lot is because
Yeah.
the staff at the office has done a good job with getting these things so that, you know, all the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed, particularly from the planning board point of view, so.
Yeah.
Hopefully that stays the same, but, you know,
Yeah,
have
my
somebody
only
with
thought
your-
is, you know, the ZBA should meet like once a year for
Yes,
an
no-
organizational meeting.
no
even
question
if
about
it's a
that, yes.
half-hour who's who.
And I've been after Bill to get that done, but with you on there, I think that'll make a difference.
Can we do this in one motion, or do you want 2 different motions?
I await a motion.
Doesn't matter. I move to appoint David Coffey to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire June 30th, 2021, and to appoint him as an alternate to the Ordinance Review Committee.
second.
A second, okay. Any further discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, 5-0. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for volunteering. Happy to have the expertise. Okay, so I guess we decided now to go with item D next, which is the discussion of the contract about the streetlights and the replacing them with LEDs, so. We have a guest here this evening, and Rick, do you want to introduce this?
Following up on yes.
Like you brought a submarine.
Yeah, he brought some stuff with him. So this is Mark Carter, Vice President of Sales from Real Term Energy. As you know, Camden has been considering moving forward, or is moving forward with this option. Quite a few months ago, we had, the board discussed, and we had brought forward send out an RFP. That RFP went out, and we only had 2 responses, of which one of them was Real Term Energy. You did the streetlights in Rockland as well, correct?
Well, as part of that consortium of towns that included Camden, Rockport,
Right.
Rockland,
But I think,
Thomaston.
but didn't you do Rockland several years ago when the first part of their project was, isn't that where?
They were a part of the original working committee that actually helped pass the legislation. So it
Right,
was
yeah.
kind of dubbed the Falmouth Four. It was Falmouth, South
South-
Portland, Bedford, and Rockland,
And
so,
Rockland,
yes, Rockland.
yep.
Yeah.
So they've been working on this. We've been considering it for several years. But there's been a learning curve going on, and I think there's been a lot of improvements that have been made in the process. As Mark alluded to, the legislation has changed dramatically over the past 4 years to allow municipalities to do this kind of work. And frankly, the companies that are doing it are getting better at it, because they've, you know, we're not the first ones out of the gate. So Mark has a presentation similar to the one that he's done in other places to explain how this all works. And if you want to go through that presentation, that would be great, Mark.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much. Mark Carter from Real Term Energy, resident of Pownell, Maine. First of all, thank you very much for moving me up. That was very kind of you. It's still a long drive, but not nearly the drive I had back from Madawaska a few weeks ago, so it was slightly different. And I'll keep this brief, but feel free to stop at any time and expound upon any point that you have questions about. The first slide we had is just an executive summary. So this just gives an overview of the project itself. You have exactly 247 fixtures, the majority of which are your standard Cobra fixtures, pole mounted. I think you only have 5 either decorative or floodlights in your inventory that looking to upgrade.
That's not correct. We do have a lot more of those decorative ones.
That have already been converted though, correct? Or-
No,
Nope.
it's still,
Okay, so that
count
wasn't
is-
part of what was.
That count is wrong, because
okay.
Mark, you would know better than anybody, but
There's a lot of 'em.
I'd say it's probably close to
I think your
100
247 number is
is
pretty.
the right
yeah.
number, but the number of them that are decorative is a lot higher than that.
Okay,
The decorative ones are the ones that kind of look like upside-down flowers.
Flat.
Yeah.
with a flat glass.
Yeah.
So I should say 247 from a pricing perspective is what we had put together
That's
as
the
part
total
of the
number, yes.
RFQ. And, but I do know some of the other towns or cities that submitted do have some already converted. So
What would you say, is it about a 60-40 Cobras and decorative, Mark, or is it 50-50? You've gone around and looked at them all.
Many, yeah, it's less than, it might even be 20/80. I mean,
Oh,
there are-
really? You think it's
Yeah.
20?
I mean, most of them, if I remember correctly, were in the village area, the downtown, and maybe in Simonton's corner, but
Okay.
It's not really critical at this point of the
No.
discussion.
No.
no.
And generally, those are already town-owned assets, decorative lights, so you have the ability, you don't have to buy them back from CMP. So current energy consumption is about 109,000 kilowatt hours, and they use, CMP uses a standard operating hours of 4,200 hours per year. And the technology that would be replaced with those high-pressure sodium lights would be smart-ready LED fixtures. And just a point, what a smart-ready LED, all of the major LED manufacturers have now gone to a new photocell receptacle design. So instead of just the 3 power blades, which you've seen on the photocell receptacles for 50-plus years, the new ANSI design has 4 low-voltage connectors to that. And 2 of these are dedicated per the ANSI spec to be pre-wired to the driver on the inside. So what that allows you to do is in the future, or during the installation, is if you have a smart controller, it can actually monitor and control the intensity of the light output. And it does that through a 0 to 10 volt signal. So if it gives 10 volts, the driver receives that signal and says, okay, it should be on 100%. If it gets 8 volts, it thinks it needs to be at 80% and will dim that down. So 50%, 5 volts, and so forth. So every single fixture would be smart ready. So whether you decide to add smart controls at the time of installation or at a future time, the fixture would support that. You wouldn't have to open up, rewire. You just would have to replace the dusk to dawn photocell controller with the smart controller at that point. The other things that will come up through the installation is color temperature. So that's to be determined, and there's a couple slides on that. We'll cover that specifically. That's certainly a very hot topic right now, especially with the AMA. The American Medical Association had a report a couple years ago that covered blue light and melatonin suppression. The average lifespan of a LED fixture is about 100,000 hours, which just is, I think, just under 23 years. And all of the fixtures that we purchase through the major manufacturers offer a 10-year warranty. So any failures in the first 10 years would be covered by the manufacturer, would be replaced at no cost. Let's see, so your energy savings would drop from, or your consumption would drop from 109,000 down to, I think, 38,000 or so, for annual savings of 75,000 kilowatt hours, or roughly a 69% reduction in your energy consumption and associated greenhouse gas emission. And then the financing, there are different options for that we can discuss. The total project cost is expected to be somewhere about $126,000. The acquisition cost from Central Maine Power is roughly $24,000 for a total project of about $151,000, which gives you an ROI of about 3.3 years. So very fast payback. So that's an overall summary.
Can I ask a question about the
Sure.
acquisition costs? We have to buy the lights from CMP that we have right now,
Absolutely.
and then what do we do with them?
Then you will recycle them. We'll recycle them for you. So it actually gotten to a point now where it's about, there are enough companies that want to buy the scrap metal that it comes to be, you know.
So that acquisition cost, is that a net cost, or is there, you pay the cost and then you can get something back for them, or?
No, no, you don't pay anything on top of them to recycle them.
No, but I mean, do you get anything back for the scrap metal or whatever? That's what I'm
No,
asking.
it's gotten to the point where you used to have to pay extra. So you'd buy them from CMP, and then when you remove them,
Okay.
the state requires you to certify that you've recycled them. And that cost has pretty much been mitigated and neutral.
Okay.
So what you get when you purchase the street lights from Central Maine Power or Emera, anywhere in the state, is you essentially get three things. So you do get the fixture itself, which you'll replace. You do get the mast arm, which does have value. And then you also get the grandfathering of the location of that pole, so, or that mast arm and that light. So you can imagine over 50, 60 years as they've been putting up lights, the rules and regulations of where you can put a street light 50 years ago is different than today, based on the National Electric Code. So one advantage is that you can replace an existing light with a new light, and you are grandfathered in
You don't have to
doing
move
that.
it.
Correct. Although, through the process, if there are some in the high power zone, we would recommend that we actually have those lowered to get them out, so within the area of approach. So that is something that we would consider or recommend. So there's a breakout from the annual electrical consumption of 109,000 kilowatt hours down to 34 for a savings of 75,000 kilowatt hours. But surprisingly, it's not the energy costs and delivery that's the greatest amount. It's really the annual lighting equipment charges, which is the rental fee and your maintenance that you're paying to Central Maine Power. So you see that's just over $38,000 a year, and that would completely disappear. And then you would see reductions in your delivery charges from $5,400 to $1,700. Your supply charges would drop from like $12,000 to $3,700. The maintenance cost, which is included currently as part of that lighting equipment charges, so there would now be a maintenance charge. So the town would be responsible for the maintenance, but that amount would cover, you know, if a complaint comes in that there's a light out, you call an 800 number or send an email, and that would be taken care of for you. So there's no change. Instead of calling CMP, we just call either, whether it be us or a third-party maintenance company. So your total expenditures would drop from roughly $55,000 down to about $11,000 for a savings of about $45,000 a year. And what that equates to is roughly you're paying $225 per fixture now, and that would drop to $46 per fixture on average for a total of 79% savings. So just a quick, and I did a quick summary, there's different financing options. One of the most popular one is a tax-exempt lease. So they're fairly aggressive on their pricing. Their interest rates now, they have creeped up over the last year with the 4 increases in the prime rate, but they're about 4.1% now. So on a 10-year lease, that would be about $18,500. So you would be net cash flow positive about $25,000 per year for the first 10 years, and then you would then that financing charge would end, and for the next 10 to 13 years of the life cycle of the fixture, you would have 100% savings. So
Who provides that financing?
there's different options. So there's a company we have worked with out of Vermont, MLC. Some municipalities we've worked with have actually just gone to their local banks to get financing. Or if you want an energy performance contract, you could do that and guarantee the savings. You pay a little higher interest rate. A lot of people don't go that route because it's not a fluctuating rate. It's not like a solar or wind project where you want to be guaranteed the rates. This is an unmetered service. So if you put up a 26-watt LED fixture, CMP is going to charge you for 26 watts. So there's no risk in the savings. It's which is why they're able to provide those interest rates.
Does that charge vary with the smart fixture?
It doesn't. What would increase is the capital cost up front. So if you wanted to add smart controls or any other add-ons such as enhancement for public Wi-Fi or increased cellular connectivity, any sort of kind of smart city type application, then that could increase the capital cost, which could increase your annual cost. But
they still charge you for a 26-watt bulb, even though you may be
correct
running it at 13 watts.
Oh, that okay. I see your point now.
What's the value of the dimmer switch?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. So currently, the utility does not recognize every smart controller does have a meter in it, so it monitors the current, voltage, power factor, all that of the light. So if you dim it 50%, if you take a 26-watt light, dim it to 13 watts, the utility will not recognize that. They'll say it's a 26-watt light. We're going to charge you for a 26-watt light. The first utility that we've seen, and this is just in the last few months, Eversource in Massachusetts, is now starting to recognize. We think that's a growing trend, but at this point, I would not factor into your calculations that dimming would save any money. And as you see, the reduction from your delivery supply charges are already down to combined about a little over 5,000. So it's the amount that you can save above and beyond there is somewhat limited.
The big advantage to being able to dim it is for resident.
Yeah, have the light the way you want it.
Right.
That's typically what it is. So a lot of, we've seen about a 50-50. So South Portland, Falmouth, Wells have all gone with controls. Dover Foxcroft, Mount Desert.
Rockland does too, correct?
They're downtown. So, they're part of this consortium as well. They haven't done their Cobra headlights.
Right, but the downtown ones are.
The downtown ones do have a Roam automated control system. So
one of the nice things, I know the fire department has, if there's something going on, they can roll in a bunch of lights. But there's also, I think they're only running at like 70% capacity or something, or 75%. And they have the ability to crank them up to full power if necessary. If there was something going on in the city at 1 in the morning and they really had to, see like daylight, they can there's the excess capacity that they can just crank them up and be able to see it. Or they can crank them up in a two-block area.
And when you mention controls, it's not just dimming. You're right, you can go upwards, and there are a number of municipalities and major cities that do that. So they want their lights, instead of adding extra lights, they'll just oversize their lights and run them at a reduced percentage most of the night.
But you're gonna pay for the full, you're gonna pay for the full capacity.
That's the drawback is, so if you upsize your lights, the cost of the fixture up front changes very little. It's really what you're gonna pay to the utility, and that's where they get you. But if there's a section of town, I know like in Austin, Texas, they oversize their lights, and, you know, on either side of closing hour, they like to increase the light level to have, you know, from a crime prevention standpoint. But the same thing, it can be on an ad hoc.
But you're paying, the important thing is you're paying for that increased capacity year-round.
You're absolutely correct.
So I wrote down two, you have more to go?
Nope. Go ahead.
No, I just wrote down two notes here. The first one says, sounds too good to be true. And the second says, what could possibly go wrong with the municipality owning its lights? So I love the idea, but, you know, sounds too good to be true.
Well, it took 10 years to make it too good to be true for the municipalities to actually enact the legislation to actually have the ability to buy back their lights. So, and if you look at the number of, in fact, the next slide, these are just the projects that we're working with, and that's not even listing the 6 towns as part of this project. Everywhere from Madawaska to Wells to Bar Harbor. You can see the overwhelming response is because there is a very, and in addition to this, with some of our competitors, you get, you know, there's also Portland and Scarborough and Brewer, and there's some municipally owned utilities that have already done that as well, including Bangor and Lewiston. So I suspect by the end of the year, from a total light population in the state, well over half the lights will be converted. So it is a tremendous savings and opportunity for the municipality. Downside is most people, by buying a services contract and paying that maintenance, that covers all your truck rolls to the poles. And if there's any failures due to fixtures or photocells or smart controls, those have a 10-year warranty, so those get replaced at no cost. Really, your cost is if you have vandalisms, you have pole knockdowns, those sorts of special events. But what municipalities would do would actually put this under their general liability and their insurance clause.
Well, that was one question I did have, because it really doesn't cut Central Maine out of the picture in terms of the poles or Fairpoint out, and you know, so we're still sort of hostage to them. If a car hits a pole and knocks it down, we can say, gee, Central Maine, you know, please come replace that pole, which, you know, may or may not get done for months or something. How do we kind of work around that?
So, I mean,
they haven't been terribly responsive to us thus far.
You'd be surprised that you're not the only
We're not
one.
alone, I know.
But they do own the poles, right? So they would go back, they would replace the pole. That would still remain Central Maine Power's responsibility to do that. The question at that point is, would they reinstall the light and then potentially back charge the municipality or the town? Or if they didn't replace it, then the maintenance crew would have to go out. If it was damaged beyond reinstallation, then the maintenance team, after they get the pole up, would have to go back and replace that fixture.
You gonna show us?
I'm sorry?
You gonna show us?
Oh, well, yeah, I'll
Ran
happy
all that
to,
extension cord.
Well, you do have the extension cord, so.
While he's doing that, I mean, the other issue here is that if all kinds of people do this and CMP sees their demand go way down, then that forces the prices up. But then if everybody else does it and we don't, our price is gonna go up anyway, so.
No, they're not. I mean, there are solar lights. They're typically located in, so if you wanted to add lights to a park where the cost of trenching would be excessive, that's typically the best location for solar lights. They tend to be, the average LED fixture now is down to, depending on the wattage, somewhere in the $100 to $140 range. A solar light could be $800 to $1,200. So
And how long does
you're
it
actually better off putting up just a regular LED and then putting up a solar panel to offset that as opposed to a solar-powered light, because they tend as a combination to be.
Do you foresee a gadget like that being added on that might be able to have that capability?
So what I've generally seen, and New Jersey have done a lot of these down in the New Jersey Power Authority territory, is on every pole they would have a 3x5 solar panel, kind of a 200 watt. But it wouldn't be powering the fixture, because then you need a battery. And then you start raising costs when you start adding batteries to every light. What the solar panels are actually tied into the grid. So they're using the solar panels on the pole as a distributed generation across the network, but it isn't specifically, so it's feeding into the grid, and they're, using their
So we're better off just doing what we're doing, which is have solar panels on the town office and feed back into the grid. The net result is.
You'll get a better return, because you're
Yeah.
much more efficiency if you have a central inverter versus individual microinverters on every single solar panel on a per light. And a lot of times lights can be mixed in with trees, and it's hard to get a good solar exposure to that, so.
And can you get the same time, the same light, number of hours of light in the middle of winter time when we have 18 hours of darkness? Or whatever, it seems like 18 hours, but when you have all that darkness, will we be able, do the solar lights actually have enough capacity to carry you through the night?
They've made tremendous improvements over the last 8 to 10 years. So it did used to be an issue. What they tend to do is incorporate motion sensors in the solar lights, so that you have multiple wattages. So if there's nobody active around that, maybe you dim it down to 5 or 10 watts, so you do have some light, and if the motion sensor picks up, then it increases. So that helps to save the battery life. You can even have it, if it's in a park, you could have it shut off at certain hours, and then only turn on based on motion sensing. So, but we're seeing in northern states, Massachusetts, in province of Ontario, you are starting to see them. You obviously get a lot better sun exposure. The biggest adoption is in California, Australia, Florida, those sort of states, but in countries. But we are seeing an influx and an increase of solar lights even in the Northeast. But you're right, you do have much less, and plus the sun doesn't quite get nearly the same apex as well during the winter months, so it makes it a little more difficult from a charging and exposure standpoint.
I've got a question for our TIF experts down here. We're using 40,000 out of the TIF for certain infrastructure up here now. Would in our TIF districts, the money in that be able to be used to offset the lights?
My first answer, and I'd have to defer to Bill on that, I think we probably could use it to buy the lights. I don't know that we could use it for
No, I'm
the
not saying,
ongoing
I'm not saying
charges.
right, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't know
If
that-
within the districts that we have, we can use that money.
Yeah, I
think that the thing would be, if it was listed as an improvement,
Yeah, I think it is. I think street lighting is,
lights?
certainly in the downtown tip,
Oh,
I
just-
think it is.
just trying to
Yeah, it's an
squeeze a
interesting
nickel
question, but my guess would
a
be,
little harder.
you could probably use it to buy the lights, but my guess would be probably not for the ongoing.
No,
electricity
that's,
charges.
I just looking to get the upfront money
Yeah.
down a little
Well,
more.
if you can reduce that, then your return
Well,
on
that
investment is a little shorter.
that 3.3 goes back to whatever.
Right, yeah.
Would you say a few more words about the temperature? When I mentioned this to a friend of mine about, our switching over to LED, she kind of shrieked and
Yes.
said that,
Yes. So the color temperature references, and it's roughly the warmness or the orangeness of the light. So, and it specifically references the color of a black body as it gets hotter. So you think of a piece of a metal, as it warms up, it goes from a red to an orange to, a white hot metal. And that's kind of what you're looking at. This is an example of a hybrid deployment where they use 4,000 Kelvin. So 4,000 is, I think, fairly close to moon color temperature, which I think is 4,100 color. And
like a
it's
full moon.
A full moon is typically around 4,100, and It's probably more common you see in big box retail stores, Staples or Shaw's. A lot of them tend to go with the higher because they're more efficient and they're a little cheaper to deploy. And then the 3000 is, you can see, has much more of a yellowish orange hue. And what's becoming more and even more popular, the most is 2700 Kelvin, which is one step even more orange, more warm. The considerations that most municipalities make on that is some that have concerns, the International Dark Skies Association, for those who want to reduce your light pollution, they recommend as low a color temperature as possible. So they recommend 3000 or less. And then a lot of municipalities that we've had, like Mount Desert Island, which I think is a Class 2 dark skies, they want to ensure they had full cutoff light, so there's no upward light.
Is that what these are?
Yeah, these are all full cutoffs,
cutoff.
and they typically have what's called a bug rating, a backlight, uplight, and a glare rating for each of the fixtures. So you want a full cutoff light, and then the warmer the color, the less radiating light that you get off, even off of reflected surfaces.
Because I had a student in my office, I'm wondering if he's the other person that's watching the live stream. There's only two of us watching. But he was concerned about the Dark Skies Initiative, and he was doing a project for a school and wanted to know, how this would impact the Dark Skies initiatives that he would like to see.
Yep. So the International Dark Skies does recommend 3000 Kelvin or less. And then a lot of coastal towns, I know when I was at Rockland last week and Bar Harbor and Mount Desert, Mount Desert went all 2700 Kelvin. So they went the warmest color temperature. The costs are relatively the same. You give up a little bit of efficiency, but not a lot. That discrepancy has dropped a lot, so there's not a big cost impact by going warmer. And the other consideration that some municipalities take is that currently the high pressure sodium is somewhere between 2 and 2200 Kelvin based on the age of the light, the high pressure sodium. So the 2700 Kelvin is getting closer and closer to that range. So it's less of a disruptive view. So if you replaced out a high pressure sodium with a 2700, it's much less noticeable than if you replaced a 2200 Kelvin with a 4000 Kelvin light, which is, starkly bright.
I think that's what we ended up, a lot has changed since we did the Marine Park. When we put the lights on in Marine Park, there wasn't a lot of choices in the lighting. And it's probably in the 4000 range, and it is the stark white light.
And even earlier on, they had 5000 Kelvin.
Oh, really?
So the DOT's still putting them up. You run up and down 295, you'll see all the exits are all full of the...
I think remember you were talking to Route 1 and 90 there, they've got the really white, probably the 4K right at the intersection up there.
Yeah. So we've, to date, we have, I think, 38 projects in Maine. I think there's only one looking at putting in any 4000. All that we've actually done to date, I know South Portland did all 2700 Kelvin. Mount Desert did all 2700. I know Dover Foxtrot did 3000 downtown and then 2700 in the residences. The same with Wells. And I think Falmouth went all 3000 Kelvin across. But they've all, to date, that we've actually done the physical installs have all been at 3000 or 2700 Kelvin. So that's generally been the trend, is toward the warmer light.
Is that adjustable once the light is in, or is that a feature of the light itself?
No, that's a feature of the actual LED chip themselves. So at the time of manufacturing, they use certain phosphors to coat the light, and that's set. You can change the intensity or the wattage, but that doesn't change the color. Not like an incandescent where if it's burning brighter, it might burn a little whiter, and if you dim that down, it gets a little oranger. Right. That doesn't happen with LEDs. It maintains its color temperature.
I have seen some photography of cities that have converted over to LED, full cutoff LED lights where, it was taken from like the mountainside or countryside looking down at the city, and you'd see like this big dome of light before with the traditional street lights, and then once they went to the full cutoff LED lights, the light is much more focused at the ground level. I mean, you still have lighting, but you don't have that kind of dome of light that's above.
That uplighting, that
Right.
uplighting that you got with the older, especially the older style high-pressure sodiums that weren't cut off.
Right.
You had the bulb glass that you've seen that really spilled the light upwards. So
Right.
you've got a much more light pollution with
Yep.
the older style lights.
Anybody have any more questions?
My last question would be, if you were to do this, would you come in with one guy, one truck, or 30 guys and 15 trucks? How long do you think it would take?
Oh, so typically, typically have our crews work with 2 trucks, so 2 people per truck, so a 4-person team. And they'll typically do on average anywhere from 50 to 80 lights per day. So you're looking at about a week's worth of work to fully deploy the system. So it's not a lot of time, really. The time is the kind of the stages we go through. We actually do a GIS audit to collect all the data that we need. So we don't just need to know where the pole is, but we need to know how high the light is, how long the mast arm is, what's the road width, what's the road classification, what's the setback.
Yeah.
So all that feeds into the photometric design, so we actually properly design the right lights, because you may have lights out there that were just put up because that's what was in the truck when the storm came through. So your 3 neighbors may have 50-watt lights, and you may have a 150-watt light because that was there. So this is kind of the one time to help fix the sins of the past, to more make, when you walk, driving down a residential street, it should have a similar comfort feel for visibility from one street to the next. And then the road classifications, like for downtown or your highways, will actually have a much higher requirement for wattage. So the photometric design team will take that into consideration, put together an investment-grade audit, and then the installation will actually, which is something you could track online, you actually see the lights change in real time as they go through your town and upgrade them. So we're tracking not only how many lights to replace, but we allot for so many wiring replacements. So especially for a coastal town, the salt air can get up and start to corrode the wiring, and you really don't know until you get up. You can't see it from the ground, and typically 2% mast arm replacements is a rough. So we would probably 4 or 5 mast arms might need to be replaced that maybe you don't know until you get up there. You see that it's cracked or damaged somehow. But so we track all that on a daily basis, how many lights per day are replaced in all the allotments. So
It may be a good opportunity also when you're doing that audit you're going to have it plotted on a map, you said?
yeah, so step 1 is we do that, and it's all based in a GIS format. That's all your data that we provide you in a shape file or any sort of export.
We
that
already
you
have
want.
we have those files already, but we don't have the mast arm, we don't have
Yeah.
the pole data. But the question would be is that, are all these lights, do we need all the lights that we have up? Because some of those lights could be existing in places that there's really no reason for the light to be there. That, it may be in an area that just somebody decided that they wanted to have a street light put up at, 20 years ago, and that changes, that need may have gone away.
Yeah, so we'll look at deficiency. So if there's any intersections or crosswalks or school areas that don't have enough lighting, we'll certainly inform you of that and provide you what our recommended solution would be, and you would make the decision. I've seen, I think the town manager of Falmouth actually, I think, was sending out a notice to his residents, if anybody doesn't want a street light.
would be me.
There's lots of people in Maine that don't want street lights. So, you may have neighbors, across the street from each other. That's, that becomes a little more delicate if one wants one doesn't. And if you want to add any, so during this design process, we'd like to sit down with representatives from like the fire department, police department, because we've seen in other localities, like, in fact, Falmouth, they wanted to actually have streetlights by all their dry hydrants. So even though they fill them up, the tank trucks with the lights on, they wanted to actually have streetlights there as well as an added measure of security. So they're adding those to the 3 dry hydrants they have in Falmouth. So any other scenarios like that, high areas of accidents, we'll look at whether or not street lighting might be a way to help improve. Yes, ma'am?
How long does the audit usually take, your audit that you do?
The audit, For this town, it would be about a day, day and a half. They can typically do about 300 lights per day in the audit, depending on pole spacings and things of that. So, but they would probably also collect not just the 247 or 74, or 247, but they would also collect all your decoratives as well. So even though those aren't going to be replaced, you'll have a complete inventory of all your lights in the
I believe the decoratives are part of that number. It's the total is
And
247.
we may want to replace some of the decoratives
right.
too, if it's a more efficient fixture.
So those are that would be the Cobra Head one?
That's, yeah, that's just one example. There's different styles. And there was interest last week in the city of Rockland that they wanted to put up a few samples. So it might be worthwhile to pick a geographically centric location, whether it's be Rockport, Rockland, somewhere in that area that Thomaston and Union and Camden can all visit. And maybe you have 3 different styles of fixtures that have, because there are 3 kind of primary differences. And I'm not going to point it up because it's quite bright, but you've seen LEDs where lights before where it looks like a whole bunch of dots, right? It's some people think that's glare, very glary. Some others don't. There's a manufacturer or multiple manufacturers that make what's called kind of a chip-on board, which is a large LED that's kind of glass enclosed, a polycarbonate enclosed light, but it's a single light source. So it's just one point of light that's illuminating. Some people think that looks more like a high-pressure sodium light, so much more comfortable than what the residents are used to seeing today. And then there's a manufacturer that makes one where you don't actually see the LED at all. It's actually off to the side, and the optics are actually illuminating the panel, and then the panel illuminates the ground. So there's pros and cons, but the thought is to maybe put up a couple samples of each and get some feedback from the residents. So.
Yeah, at this point, I'm ready to ask Rick to continue to pursue this, but I guess I have a question for the select board, and I dread to ask it. Are we going to need a committee to pick out what color lights we're going to have and what head fixtures?
I would say no.
No.
No, I don't think we can, I mean, it sounds like
Do an online
it's been
survey.
fairly uniform.
We'll do a survey.
Seriously, I
survey.
think you
Sounds like
can.
It's been
survey.
fairly uniform what most towns are looking. You're telling us most towns are looking at the 2,700 to 3,000, and, we may, I don't know if we have any place, maybe 17 and 90, we might want to hire one there or whatever, because it's a busy intersection with a lot of accidents.
We're just happy to have some that work.
I'm all for that, but I guarantee you we're going to hear about it. no
Yeah,
matter
but I
what
do
we're-
think that you can do an online survey sort of mechanism so that residents can, you ask a few questions, they can go online, they can,
Well,
give their input.
One thing I learned really is that the lights that you're gonna put up are gonna have a Kelvin number that's higher than the low pressure or high pressure sodium that are out there.
That is correct.
So they're gonna seem whiter than what we have out there, even at a 27.
Yeah, I heard that too. What about, I want to ask one quick question, and then I think we can move on about the motion sensors. You mentioned some people have motion sensors on the lights. Is that an expensive thing to do? Is it not worth doing?
That's for the solar lights, and they're typically
okay.
integrated into the light. And you can add you can add motion sensors into the fixtures themselves.
Yeah.
I certainly do not recommend that for any sort of roadway application.
Okay.
But
Well, the
when you
reason
use-
I ask is because I have a light out near my house, but the traffic is, I mean, if we get 1 or 2 cars a night,
Yeah.
it's a lot. And it would be nice if the light wasn't on, so we could go out and look at the stars.
Do you have a
things like
BB
that.
gun?
Believe me, I've thought of it.
But I
Well,
will say
wasn't
if you
it
have
out for like
parks-
3 years?
It goes out every once in a while. It's always nicer when it's out, but.
I think that was the one that was
so
out
That's
for
the reason,
3
only reason I
years.
asked, is if the light came on when it was needed, in other words, when a car was driving by, that, I don't know if that technology is there, or.
So typically, a roadway classification will drop at night when the number of cars drop as well. So if you had controls, you could set it up that later at night, so whenever your school activity bus or late bus got dropped kids off, if you wanted to wait until after that, so 9:30, 10, and then you could dim all the lights down from, Cambridge, Massachusetts does that. They drop their lights 50% at about 10:30 at night. So there are municipalities that do that provide a little more, at certain hours.
So even with the, again, back to your point of comparing it to the sodium lights that are out there now, which are the 2,200, we have the 2,700, but if you dim that down, then you're gonna be looking at an effective light that may not be as bright as the sodiums now.
Well, you say brightness is, the color temperature changes the perception of.
Right, that's what
of
I'm-
the light.
that's
So
what
that's what's difficult to, you can't match lumens to lumens because it's different.
When
But
you
it's-
go out, when you go out, providing it's working, provided it's working, there are some lights, the street lights out here that are the decorative sodium ones.
Okay.
So you can take a look at what we ended up with.
Well, we have in our packet, no decision expected tonight.
flat wood.
But just a nod if the select board wants Rick to dive into this a little bit more and come back with some more concrete information. And, you know, I think it sounds like a good idea.
One of the
Yep.
more interesting topics.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you
thank you very much for
your
coming.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank you.
Thanks for
presentation.
bringing the light.
Thank you.
Showing us the light.
Yeah.
Okay, next on the agenda is actually going back now to item B, which is discussion of the EMS contract and possible municipal consortium. I'll ask Rick to introduce that one.
Yeah, we have a couple of, several visitors here, but this is part of a lengthy discussion that's been going on. You know, honestly, it got out a little ahead of where I thought we were, but I think, you know, it's out, it's ready for prime time here. With the advent of the, did you just turn up my volume here? Yeah, okay. I'm not speaking louder enough. You know, over the past couple of years with the Northeast Ambulance contract, there has been some discussion about the Northeast Ambulance contract and the price of that going up, and the uncertainty that it presents for us, not only with this contract, but in future contracts. And so the four managers talked about it briefly, and the idea was, you know, if there was a group of people that were working on, you know, what are the alternatives that might be interesting to look at, and that's where we are now. And so Jason is here, and Chief Wytock and Chief Farley are here to answer any questions. Did you see the they did a very good presentation. I sent you the link from the Camden board meeting.
And I handed out the handout that was given out at the Camden town meeting a week or two ago that Chris Farley put together, which is really sort of, I believe that's kind of the background white paper that got a lot of this discussion moving along.
I'd be interested to hear from them.
Yep.
Well,
Jason,
You
come
guys
on
wanna
up.
come- Chief Farley?
This wasn't his, was it? That gentleman?
No, it's,
No.
Oh, okay.
it's ours.
that controls
A
all
nice
the
one.
streetlights in Rockland.
Right, yeah.
We just did the streetlights in Rockland, yeah.
So I was asked a few weeks ago to come in and just kind of hit some highlights in reference to the EMS discussions that have been going on. You have the packet. Is it provided online or anything? No?
No, no.
Okay.
It's Chief Farley's letter.
Okay. So roughly 8 months ago, Audra, the Camden Town Manager, reached out to Tom Luttrell, which is the City Rockland's Town Manager, as well as Chief Wytock, just to open a discussion about EMS services. They had several meetings just to kind of go over some basics on what could happen, the potentials, to get a framework. And then about 3 months ago, it was opened up to all the towns or all the fire chiefs and other officials. We did meet about a month ago. Sometime in mid-February, we actually had a meeting with all four fire chiefs, with Tom and Audra, as well as Chief Wytock, to go over a basic platform, a structure, how it would work, how we feel it could work, and what some options would be. We got a lot of information out of that meeting. So at that point, Audra wanted to present it to the select board. You have the letter that Chief Farley wrote in front of you, going over his feelings in reference to it, the history behind EMS in this area. And so we've kind of got to the point where it's going even further, so that's why I'm here.
You said 4 chiefs. Who besides the 3 of you?
Oh, 5 chiefs, actually. I apologize. So we had Camden, Lincolnville, Hope, Rockport, and Rockland fire chiefs were all present at that meeting.
Good. I guess, my thought is that the discussion ought to continue. I'm concerned about the cost. And I know we've had increases in the cost of Northeast over the last couple of years. And we've had a bit of a learning curve since we started with Northeast, both in terms of cost and in terms of operations. And I think we've gotten to a point where things have gotten better with them, and certainly haven't heard any complaints from those who've had to use the service over the years. It seems like the cost is stabilized. I think the proposal is that the next year's contract won't go up at all. So, for me, the cost will be a big deal because as I did a lot of learning when I was on the ambulance review committee when we transitioned from Camden First Aid into Northeast, and learned that it's call volume that really drives the cost of these services. And that's what happened with Northeast. When they first came in with a low number, they were counting on a call volume that had been provided by Camden First Aid, and that call volume actually dropped off fairly significantly in the first couple of years of the contract, which led to the increase.
Would it be good, Ken, to just have these folks go over what the framework of the proposal is? Because there's probably a lot of people on the other end of live stream that aren't as close to this, that don't know the details.
Right, and I actually don't, from what I have read, it would be the idea that the service would be based in Rockland and then come out to the other towns. But absolutely, if you guys could give us the summary of that, that'd be great.
I will have Chief Wytalk explain it, because obviously it's his bread and butter. And I just want to be clear, this isn't to say the Northeast isn't doing their job.
Right. No,
I want to make that very clear, that no one's ever said that this is why this is starting.
Yeah.
Times are changing significantly. We have to look into the future of what potentially could happen. They obviously are for-profit. They are looking to make money. This would be completely different. There are some of those types of EMS services that are struggling to obtain employees because of the way that their structure is first a municipality. We are working together as towns now from the fire service. We work with Rockland we're in Rockland quite frequently for calls. We're in Camden frequently for calls, and vice versa. For example, to show you how much things have changed, last Friday we were called to St. George for a structure fire. That's 19 miles away, 30-minute drive. That's how bad it's gotten in some areas where and I've told my guys, this is going to be more of a common thing. Like, the times are changing. We have to start getting proactive and start changing with them. So it's definitely something. I understand cost is a concern, but there's a lot of positive factors that will outweigh the cost. Like I said, I will have Chief Wytalk go over the whole structure and how that will work. But it is definitely something that we need to look at. Until you use the service, it's hard for you to judge. And I can tell you, it may not be a big deal here, but for Lincolnville and Hope, it is more of a concern. You talk to the citizens out there, there are times you're still waiting 20, 25 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. I live in Lincolnville. I'm a taxpayer of Lincolnville. I'm not waiting that long for an ambulance to come if it's available. So we need to take a good look at this, and I think this is a good start. That's all we're doing, is we're just looking at frameworks that can put this together. So I'll let Chief Wytalk explain it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Well, thanks for asking me to be here. I definitely appreciate the ability to get this out in the public. I'll echo everything Chief Farley said. We've been talking for a little while, just informally. It definitely started with Camden, and then we started looking at numbers and staffing and what we could do as a city of Rockland to make sure that we could provide a service for the 4 towns, yet still maintain what we have in the city. We're fortunate. We have a staff station. We've got 18 full-time personnel, and then another 10 to 12 on the call division. And like you had said, sir, definitely it costs money. There's no doubt about that. And being a municipally fund entity, you know, we're paid out of taxes, and those offset with what we can make from revenue from EMS. So that kind of kicked off where we are today. And again, looking at how we could provide a service that fits outside of Rockland, that fits the 4 towns. You know, we're still talking with Camden to talk about if Camden wanted to pursue this on their own, what that would look like for them as well. But I think it definitely makes more sense if we're going to do this that the 4 towns be involved. So, I mean, as far as staffing goes, you know, we'll be looking at probably hiring, you know, 9 or 10 additional employees. The plan is to eventually station an ambulance with 2 firefighter EMTs, and one of them being a paramedic as well. One in the Rockport station somewhere, whether it's West Rockport or in the central station, and then one in Camden as well. And then they'll work the same shift schedule that our full-time people work. We work 1 24-hour shift, and then we have 2 days off in between, so it's a 24, 48-hour shift. You know, and obviously cost drives everything, and there's no doubt about that. You know, just rough numbers, I'd say if we're looking at hiring 10 people to fill that schedule, you know, before the revenue comes into play that's generated, you're talking probably $800,000, somewhere in there. I think that's a good talking point. And again, that's before revenue. Tom Luttrell, who obviously he couldn't be here tonight, he's at his city council meeting, that's why I'm here. But, you know, we've kind of looked at this and agreed that, you know, this money, the revenue isn't, we're not just going to put it in the city coffers, it's not going to the general fund, it's going to supplement this EMS program. And I think last month, Northeast estimated somewhere around $400,000 in revenue that they bring in. My estimate was lower, but I think theirs is fairly accurate. So, you know, that $400,000 will essentially be put into equipment, into some of the personnel cost, into, you know, overtime, anything like that, and then at the end of the day, you know, the 4 towns get billed, you know, what's left over from that cost on a yearly basis. You know, the benefit being that this is a 24-hour, 24/7 911 agency, so we're not out doing transfers, we're not taking people from, you know, from Penn Bay to Portland, excuse me. Nature of the beast. Yeah, yeah. You know, so we're stationed in-house, we're stationed in town. You know, if the 2 towns get busy here, you know, we have some flexibility because we have 3 ambulances in the firehouse in Rockland. So we have some flexibility to implement some sort of programs where we're moving people up, if you will. You know, we're providing that coverage and keeping it as consistent as we can. And then the other big ability that I think we provide that any other service wouldn't is that these are going to be cross-trained personnel, just like we are in Rockland. So an ambulance call comes in, the ambulance goes out and deals with the call. A fire call comes in, the ambulance goes with the fire department and provides personnel and provides safety for the personnel working on scene. You know, that's how most municipal-based fire departments work nowadays that are full-time. It's a gradual and natural progression to be able to cover both aspects of the job and get the biggest bang for your buck, so.
Now, you're covering, excuse me, some of the other towns to the south and west of you also for mutual aid at this point.
Yeah, so the city has a contract with Owl's Head for EMS. We provide that coverage, but we are definitely picking up the slack for one other town that I foresee a change coming one way or another. Whether if we expand up this way, then we're just going to have to.
My question is, how big can the service get before it becomes really difficult to manage?
Yep.
And are there efficiencies to having it get bigger as well?
Yeah, I think as they get bigger, you have to grow. The personnel have to be considered. But I think every department, whether it's us, whether it's Rockport, Camden, I think we're all operating at a minimum. And that's why I think growing is only going to involve, you know, growing your personnel. You know, it's regionalization, if you will. I always put it in air quotes because people think that, you know, that saves money. And it does if you have, you know, two like entities within, you know, within the area that you can, you know, get rid of one to save on the other. But as far as fire and EMS goes, I don't think there's anybody in this county that has enough of something to make it work, so.
Doug, did you have something?
Well, I just wanted to say I'd very much be in favor of at least pursuing this and seeing where it goes. I understand the cost issues, but this is indeed an area that I feel I have a fair amount of expertise in, having trained at a level 1 trauma center. So I'm very familiar with both the technical aspects of this, but also the historical aspects. And we won't get into the technical part tonight. I think Northeast Ambulance does a fine job for what they are, but historically, I think Chris pointed out, you know, initial ambulance services were run by the morticians, and it's sort of, we can all remember the Cadillac station wagons with the bubbles, and so things have sort of changed, and I think the next step for a town like ours is, I'll be honest with you, I think Northeast Health, Northeast Ambulance, as good as they are, I think they're going to be a dinosaur because of the reimbursement model and the fact that it is profit-driven. I think that it's going to be extremely difficult as healthcare costs get reined in more and more to make that model viable. I think that if we sort of go to a municipally oriented service, it may cost more, but I think indeed it'll give the towns more control over it. And again, I think it's important to understand that concept of having cross-trained personnel so that, you know, when there's a bad high-velocity car accident and the first person that shows up might be a firefighter, but it would be nice if they were a firefighter EMT who could also do the emergency tracheotomy to clear your airway. If you needed to. So I'd like to keep looking into this.
I think, too, we're also kind of, you know, thinking if this carries through that, you know, what's the 2-year plan, what's the 5-year plan, and we've talked about kind of bringing the fire departments in as first responder agencies through the state, which would require us, you know, putting on EMS classes, you know, getting basic EMTs and advanced EMTs, you know, in fire departments. So if an ambulance has to come out of Rockport to go to Lincolnville's showing up, you know, with the fire department with EMS trained personnel, and that's getting care quicker. It's getting more of a continuity of care.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Just to ask the chiefs, I mean, it does seem like, looking at the opportunities there, you know, both departments have a significant number of call firefighters with limited opportunities for them to advance into a full-time role of some kind. Do you think there would be interest there, you mean, to fill that kind of cross-trained position?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, from our standpoint, we're actually currently trying to fill an open position.
Right.
So
using it's an opportunity for those guys.
Both departments right now, Camden and Rockport, both have a firefighter currently. We each have our own firefighters that are currently going to be or are in an EMS program to get into this full-time.
Right, and you know, the challenge is that you've got people that are call guys performing the function as a call firefighter with potentially not a lot of place to go as they develop, because the chances of us having full-time departments is pretty limited. But this gives at least an opportunity for them to step into a full-time role in emergency services at a different point, you know. And that's where a lot of, I mean, what's your percentage of call volume? Your EMS call.
Yeah, I mean, we're about 80% EMS.
Right.
And, you know, we do about 2,000 calls, 2,025.
So it's an opportunity to keep those people, you know, because they get trained, and they get a job in Bangor, and they leave us.
Yep.
You know, it's an opportunity for that, you know, to keep them, like you just said, if you're talking 8 to 10 more jobs, that's 8 to 10, some of these young guys, because, both departments have a lot of young guys that are eager to work and eager to respond to those calls.
Sure.
It would be great to keep them here, instead of having them go off to Bangor or Portland.
Right.
If I could just address the cost issue.
You want to just state your name?
Chris Farley, Camden Fire Chief. I think I tend to be a little bit of a numbers person. I think Mark probably knows that.
I haven't said a word yet tonight. So.
I'm waiting.
Did you hear the yet?
I just spent 2 years on Rockport's budget committee, so I'm pretty familiar with the budget. And from a cost standpoint, my father graduated from Rockport High School. His first job was at Rockport High School. He might have taught somebody sitting very near to me right now. My parents live in a little 2-bedroom behind Grafham's, and the taxes that they pay are more than his first year's salary when he was a teacher at Rockport High School. I'm very aware of the impact that what we're suggesting would have on somebody's taxes. But I think we're providing opportunities for people to stay here in the community, and I think that we're looking at ways to strengthen all of our fire departments in the area, and I think that we're looking at ways that we can offer a better service and improve the quality of our communities.
My question is,
I backed away. Is your question for me?
well, no, I agree with what has been said this evening, and I think we should pursue, to see where it leads us. But both of you guys have a red and white ribbon above your nameplate, but they're going in different directions.
We'll touch base on that when we're done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just thought I'd bring that up.
I'm glad to see that you're observant.
Yeah.
We'll get it corrected.
The white is if you're north and I'm south of him, so that's why we've done that.
Any further questions of the chiefs? And I think, Rick asked in the notes for a sentiment of the board to continue to pursue this or not, and I think the discussion is worthwhile. Like I say, that for me, the numbers are gonna be pretty important in terms of personnel and capital costs.
I think we owe it to the citizens of all 3 communities plus to do proper due diligence on options in this regard.
Well, and all 5, and I think in particular of Lincolnville and Hope, because they really struggled with the cost increase when the Northeast costs went up, and they were the folks that really struggled with that. So I don't want to forget them because they're part of our group also.
Well, I think we've already taken some steps by designing the new building, having 4 bays, right, or
Right.
2 double deep. So I
Yeah.
saw that.
One quick question. Chris, are we talking about 2 more ambulances to purchase of?
Yeah,
Okay.
so, and again, with those 2 purchases, the idea is that obviously they're Rockland ambulances, they're, we maintain them, we put them into our ambulance rotation that we have now, and again, that revenue money goes to this, so whether after the initial cost of the purchase gets done, then, every 2 years, so essentially we go from 3 to 5 ambulances, so every 2 years, a new ambulance gets replaced. Yeah, so there is.
So they last 10 years then?
So we typically replace ours every 9, but we've since increased, or got a bigger chassis with our newer ambulances, and we're expecting or hoping that we can get another year out of them.
You're getting 9 years out of them, huh? Wow.
Yeah, so every 3 years we get a new ambulance, and out of 9 years, that's only 45 to 50,000 miles.
Oh, really? That's all?
Yeah, for city. Obviously, the ones up here,
rough miles,
there'll be a little bit more on them, but again, we put them into the rotation, we treat them.
So, again, nothing against Northeast. I probably am the most recent recipient of their services in the room. We just owe it to the folks that we serve to do proper option analysis and due diligence on anything, whether it's ambulance services or anything else in what we do.
And I'd like to think that the next round of talks, if you will, or something like that, we have numbers, we have we have the model laid out, so we can, you know, we can give them to, you know, the people that make the decisions, and they can give them to their constituents, and we can get this out in the public and really put a dollar factor to a lot of people's, you know, concerns, and be able to show that, again, that nothing against whatever ambulance services covering who, but I can say that, you know, we're second to none, and we take pride in that, and we'll continue that, so.
Yeah, I've never heard one bad word about the Rockland ambulance service. I mean, it's like they're the premier ambulance service.
Thank you.
I've never hear anything bad about them.
I'd like to thank Chris and Chris for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming. And Jason
You'll enjoy the
also.
streetlights, by the way.
Yeah, Jason, we thank you for coming
And
too.
also, I do want to say, on behalf of myself anyway, that Maine suffered a loss in the fire ranks this past week, and I thought of you guys when that happened. I think all of us take for granted too much what you guys do, and so our sympathy there.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
No.
Okay.
Now everybody leaves.
Sure.
Come on, now we got the emergency operations plan. I think that's, I bounced around.
You
here.
bounced around so much, I can't.
That's right, yeah.
Probably ought to be able to go
So
through this.
discuss and approve the emergency operations plan.
God.
Jason, are you gonna hang around for this?
Yeah, Jason, can you hang around for this? The emergency operations plan, you're the EMA
EOP.
director.
Emergency operations.
You're the emergency management director.
So before we,
We're gonna go
yeah.
through all the changes, Jason.
so before we
Every
ever,
page. No, I took a look at this,
Can we get dinner, breakfast, and lunch for
I took a look at this, this afternoon, and, one of the things that I remembered from our workshop that we did, when was it, last fall, I guess? And I saw it in here in one place, and I just wasn't sure whether it was enough there or not, but we talked about the possibility of providing the authority in here for the manager, for example, to make an expense that's not, make an expenditure that's not necessarily in the budget in an emergency situation. And I think I saw it in here once where there was something, if equipment needed to be purchased, that the manager would have the authority to
Yeah,
do that.
I think we said that once.
And I just wanted to make sure that that was enough, if that was what Ray had suggested. I was looking too, and I didn't see it for commandeering equipment. We had in the drill we did, there was a situation where a snowmobile was needed to get to somebody because the road was blocked or something, and we thought, oh, you know, Joe Smith down the street had one, and can we take it, and then how's the insurance coverage, you know, for that? And I can't say I really looked through very extremely carefully, but I just wanted to I wondered if that was there, and those were the things that I remembered from the exercise we did that we wanted to see in there. But in general, I thought that the document was far improved from the last time I saw it.
yeah.
It was pretty heavy reading, I agree with you, Ken. The one thing I noticed was, I didn't really see a phone tree in here yet. There's sort of a list of phone numbers, but, you know, it's not a tree in terms of who calls who and how the notification spills down. You know, there's, on page 16, I don't expect people to.
Page 88, the back. If you look on the very back, there is a phone tree listed on here.
Is it a tree, or is it just a list of?
It says calling tree,
Calling, yeah.
All right,
page
well,
88.
maybe I missed it.
And I do want to, if I can real quick, I want to give a huge kudos to Diane Hamilton and Megan Brackett, because from what it was to what it is now, they have put a substantial amount of time,
Editing.
modifications, corrections, modifications, corrections, and so on and so forth. They've spent a ton of time to get this where it is. They've done a lot of research with all employees to get it to here. So I do want to make sure they get their credit for this.
You're absolutely right. That was so obvious, I missed it.
It wasn't going to say Doug's calling tree, but
Well, I did have another question.
Does anybody have any other questions for Jason on the plan?
Hang on a second. Oh, on page 72, the Northeast Mobile Health Services job roles, the person responsible for filling the role will be, and it has a person's name there, Joe Connolly, but shouldn't that be a position, like local director of Northeast Ambulance, or, because, you know, Joe Connolly might
What
not
page,
be.
72?
72 on the, written on the redlined,
Oh,
It should. I'm with Doug on that one. I took a quick look and saw how many different,
71, yeah.
how many different pages would have to be changed if one person changed positions. Unfortunately, it's, for the most part, they're nailed down to titles as opposed to people.
Is that might be one that they missed? Joe Conley?
yep, I will,
That makes,
who is Joe Connolly?
he's currently I believe he's the district manager for Northeast. He's the one that does all the dealings with everybody down
Okay.
here.
Well, that's what it ought to say then, you know, the district manager for Northeast Ambulance.
Yeah, I had noticed that one also, actually. So. Any questions on, down here?
And I know the department heads have also been in here. We spent a lot of time, at least 4 or 5 meetings going through this packet from page to page, making changes too, so everybody has spent quite a bit of time to get this to where it is.
You know, the way it's laid out, it's gonna have to be revised anytime a person, there's just some lists in here that have people's names and telephone numbers and that kind of thing, so.
That, right, that-
It's a yearly working document.
In the spirit of, this is so much better than past,
Right.
I say we go with it, realizing that it's gonna be revised or have revisions made to it every 6 months to a year, depending on.
I think it has to be approved every year.
Correct.
By statute, that it has to be adopted by the select board every year. And I know, when I was first on the select board, it was just plopped in front of us, and it was so old and outdated.
and it was a much simpler document. It was only a few pages.
Yeah, and it was, anyway, we're not there now, we're in a much better place.
I mean, just this page alone,
Yeah.
anytime there's a position change, there's several lists like that in the document that,
Yeah,
it's a living
it's an
document.
organic document, as we say, yeah.
And now for a brief commercial pause, I'd just like to point out that the National Weather Service is doing their local Skywarn spotter training in Rockland on March 30th or April 3rd. You have a flyer here. It's actually an interesting program. I've done it where local citizens can listen to people from the National Weather Service who come up from Gray and tell you how to report weather events and severe weather and get it back down to the people at the National Weather Service. So it is part of our kind of emergency operations center. It's hosted by the Knox County Emergency Operations Center. So for all the people in the audience, if you want to attend.
It is interesting, and I can tell you from a professional standpoint that those observations are critical.
Yeah, they
really
matter.
are,
You know something about the weather?
a little bit. Okay, are there any further comments? I would await a motion.
I motion we adopt the EOC as presented.
Second.
EOP?
EOP, sorry.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the emergency operations plan as presented. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Not to be confused with the ICP.
Yeah.
Any opposed? No, okay, there's a 5-0 vote. Thank you, Jason, and thanks also to
Thanks, yeah.
all the folks in the town office who made this happen. And our next step probably is to exercise this at
The
some
training,
point,
yep.
to really use it and make sure that we know that it works.
We'll test the calling tree soon.
Well, perhaps
Yeah,
on
that's always a
one
good
of our,
idea.
one of our optional select board meetings, we host a tabletop exercise.
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, Ray typically comes up from Knox County to do it, and they're very good.
Yeah.
We try to, we now try to do at least one a year. We've done it with the department heads. Doug, did you attend?
Yeah, you've
Doug's
been.
attended one.
Ken and I were there.
Ken, we did one a few years ago, so we try to do at least one with all the major players that are involved.
And we learned a lot.
Yeah, you pick up things every time.
Absolutely.
And Ray is very good at saying, okay, now what are you gonna do? Now what are you gonna do? Oh, I didn't
With that
look at
tabletop, we were able to make a lot of changes in
Yes.
the EOP because of
Right.
the tabletop that we did with not thinking certain things through,
Yep.
and it opened up a lot of
And it
eyes.
made us, with the budget, it made us more aware of the Emergency Operations Center, what we were lacking, what we needed to do to move that forward. And that came out of that tabletop exercise.
Yeah, the radios and all that, that's a big thing.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
Next item is discuss sewer bond warrant article.
As you remember, there was, the board voted at a previous meeting to move forward with the sewer bond. Here's the draft language for your first review. You still have some time to wordsmith it if you want. This is what our lawyer has developed. I've asked that we have some kind of explanatory language added into it. So it's legalese stuff that, the lawyers understand, but for the average voter looking at this, for them to understand what are they voting on, I don't know that they're.
Well, the hardest part with this is the fact that because this is a sewer project, it doesn't impact the tax rate.
Right.
The bond is repaid from revenues generated by the wastewater system, but legally, the town is taking on the liability, so that if the wastewater system were to somehow to go belly up or something like that, or default on it or something, then the taxpayers are on the hook for the bond. But in the normal course of operations, the bond payments here are all taken care of by wastewater charges. And I think that's.
And the
what-
TIF funding.
We're right, and actually, the sewer TIF is gonna take care of that as well, so that it has even less impact on the ratepayers. And that's what I think Rick is speaking, that's the hard part, is that people will see this and realize, oh, wait a minute, I don't wanna go into debt more than we should, or that's a lot of money, or something like that, but the reality is, the way the wastewater budget has been structured in recent years, that we've done a pretty good job at anticipating these things coming along, so that they really don't have a gigantic impact on the wastewater user fees. Actually, the biggest impact on the wastewater user fees next year is gonna be the fact that the hospital's using a lot less water. They're saving water, so the flows are down, so that, there's some fixed expenses that are gonna have to be covered, but anyway. But this looks, I guess what I would say, Rick, is what you've just said, is there's any way we can get an explanatory
Cover letter.
sentence in there that says, because people are gonna go in the voting booth and vote on this thing, and
Yeah, it
Well,
should
the
be,
top line is, this does not bump your,
right. This
Yeah.
is to expand the sewer system along Route 1, and it does not have any impact on your mill rate.
right. If we can do that, and
Do,
watermark.
do,
at the top.
so let me ask another question outside the box. If you were to have some wording in there that said, this will not impact your taxes or not raise, whatever the verbiage is, does it have to be black and white? Can you raise that in a different color on your warrant article?
No.
that's probably color printing, Linda, would probably cost a lot more money.
It would cost a lot more money, and I've never seen one done that
I'm
way.
just
You
asking.
can
I
give
mean,
it
just,
caps and bold on the top line and you're good.
Given that, the bond council is really leery about putting any kind of extra language in, having a
Yeah.
different color.
Well, and we
Push
can't
her over
say
the
that it
top.
definitely won't, because there is that chance that,
Yeah.
Well,
the town is taking
I
on
just-
the obligation.
I just heard it a minute ago here.
Yeah, it's,
Okay, so you have a cover letter or something that is available at the time, or we send it out ahead of time.
we'll definitely
we
have to
explain
do
it in
some
the annual report?
publicity, yeah.
Oh,
Okay, that's another option.
The last time we did the bond for the sewer extension, we did some information, and a good deal of informational campaign that went into it. But even at that, there's a certain percentage of the people that are gonna go into that ballot, voting booth and close the curtain, and they're not gonna know what this is.
Yeah.
And even as much as I know, I may have a tendency to look at that and go, what? They want $4.5 million more? What's that gonna cost me? There's a tendency for people to vote no on anything that they don't understand. If you don't understand it, you have a tendency to vote no.
On the warrant, can't you put because we've done that in the past, haven't we? This will impact your mill rate by 0.0
Yeah,
cents a
yeah. The challenge here is it's a bond article. You know, so a lot of our other articles, we do have some more flexibility on.
Okay.
The bond article.
It's gotta be just so.
It's gotta be just so. I mean, I mean, I can work, I'm gonna work with Shauna some more on it, because I think it needs to have an explanatory statement.
But even if we could say, the plan is for this, these bond, the repayment of this bond to be funded by sewer user fees and the TIF district.
Right.
That way you're not saying it definitively, which is, and that's a true statement, that's what the plan is,
And you can say thereby not affecting your mill rate.
yeah.
So, all right, so Rick's gonna work on the language.
Yeah.
What do we
But
need?
you're okay with it the way it is, and if we can get the additional language in, great.
Don't write
Yeah.
bonds.
Yeah, if we can get it in, that would be good, and we may not be able to, that may not, in that case, we'll just have to make sure we get a good information campaign out there and let people know what they're voting on. Okay. Preliminary policy discussion on allocating indirect costs to capital projects. The verbiage you have in your packet is from me. It was a first shot. It's mostly a discussion starter more than anything, not necessarily a, whatever.
You made it awful complicated.
But, so, in my estimation, it seemed like there were three ways to go. Number three was not to make any change at all in what we do right now. Number one would be to go whole hog in and just allocate everything. And number two would be the middle ground, which would be to do the extra analysis on the projects that have a different funding stream. In other words, like the library with the bond issue, or Andre, where there was private funding or something like that. And my reasoning there in thinking that was, if we're taking money out of the bucket that the taxpayers give us the money into, and we move it around from department to department a little bit, that's less of a concern to me than it is if we have a project like Andre, where we're asking Public Works to do a little bit of work on that and say, well, if we're getting private funding from that, then why don't we get the private funding to cover the cost of the Public Works time and materials or whatever to go that. So I think at this point, it's just the sentiment of the board, I think, is what we need right here.
We had talked earlier, Rick, about being able to properly allocate people's time through the course of the week, either by location, what they worked on, so that there's a breakdown that then you can use, not so much in your payroll, because they're going to get paid the same, but the department managers can then look and say, all right, how much time went here, how much time went there? And you can separate that, in private industry, we do that between capital and expense work. And if there's, for example, an engineer that is working on a capital project, they can allocate so many hours. There's not a limit. They allocate, they sign up for, well, 10 hours this week I spent on that capital project right there, and that then gets charged back to the capital project, which has obviously a different depreciation rate and some tax advantages and other things, because it's capitalized. I would think, without too much complexity, people would want to know how much time is spent at the harbor, how much time is spent at the park, how much time is spent here and there and elsewhere. You can do the same thing between capital and regular work. It's just a coding on a time card.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a different level of the way we're doing time cards. It's a dramatically different addition. I mean, it's certainly we can do anything. It's whether there's going to be enough value there to matter. I don't know. I mean, anything's possible. It's whether we can properly segregate out and separate out when people are working on one thing and working on something else on the way there, picking up.
I'm not talking about micromanaging it to death, but it's certainly by the hour in the course of the week.
If I might, I mean, that's something that the police department's been doing for years. I mean, if somebody come in and said, I want to know what your officers are doing in a 10-hour period, you pull up the 10 hours and they can give you everything they've done.
They've got a report.
Yeah.
you know,
2 hours I was in the harbor doing this, and 3 hours today I was doing that, and 4 more hours I did this.
I mean,
It's, again, this is a point of starter for
Right.
discussion. I think we could make it easier than it is.
I mean, anything's possible. It's the matter of is it gonna generate the value we want? I don't know.
I mean, my thought in looking at the way I did was that if we have a different revenue stream coming in and we're asking Public Works to do a lot of work on a project that's not in their usual list or whatever, then that different revenue stream that's not from the taxpayers can help offset their budget a little bit, as opposed to the day-to-day work they do, whether it's in the harbor or the roads or whatever.
We're in alignment, because that project could have a number,
Yeah.
and that employee could assign, I did 4 hours today against,
That one is certainly, that,
But what I'm less enthused about is the idea, and I understand where you're coming from about tracking expenses and seeing where your employees are, but I'm a little less concerned about a project, for example, let's say there's a project here at the Opera House that we put in our budget, and we fund it on the budget, and Public Works guys come over and help a little bit because it's a little cheaper than hiring an outside contractor. I'm a little less concerned about tracking that, because the money all comes from the taxpayer, whether it comes from the Public Works budget or the Opera House budget.
but I think what your point is that at least you're
Yeah.
trying to track it, at
Or-
least knowing how much
or,
time.
you know, at the end of the week, perhaps the Public Works Director would like to know how much time did I spend doing.
Yeah, I see what
Right,
your
that's
point
X,
is.
Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Through
It
the course
would-
of the week.
It would be
That's
easier.
time tracking rather than expense tracking, though, I think.
Right, but if you're doing it by time, you're just doing it by money.
You can extrapolate
But
that.
it would there are projects that it's a lot easier to do than other projects. I mean, for example, say they're down at the harbor putting in pilings. We should be able to say, okay, over the past 3 weeks, you keep track of how much time, how many man-hours went into putting in pilings, so that we know how much time we put into pilings. 'Cause that's a very specific project, and that, it's not gonna be easy, but that is definitely doable for that. Let's use, for example, we currently paint sidewalks and parking spaces and all of that stuff. When you add up all of the time that's spent and the money that's spent on doing that, it may be more cost-effective at this point for us to contract that out. But currently, we don't have anything to compare it to because we don't track that time. So,
Well,
in that case, you're gathering that information for us making budgetary decisions as we move
You
forward.
sort of do track it when it comes to that type of stuff, because when you're talking line painting,
Uh-huh.
because they come in early.
Yeah, but it goes through the day.
But,
Yeah.
well, they either take it, they come in at 6 or whatever in the morning, so they either take it as overtime or comp time.
Right.
So, I mean, there is that.
But those kind of projects, while it would be a change, it's not impossible. It's not an impossible task to say, okay, there are projects that, for that one, for example, I've wondered about that myself. Does it make sense for us to do this? When you add up all of the hours that it goes into it, trying to get it all done, and trying to get it done in a time frame that works, because, I mean, Mark, you remember, there's times that we can't get to it until July. And by then, it's like, it's late. Whereas and we're trying to save $5 at the end of the year, when if we contracted it out, it may be cheaper, and we can get it done on a schedule that makes more sense. But we don't have the tracking of that to say it is cheaper. It's back of a napkin thing.
Any further comments? Well, let's hash it over in our minds a little bit, I guess, and see where we want to go. I think what Jeff is talking about is something a little different than what I put in the my discussion here, which was, how do we, reimburse a department for a project or whatever, but you're talking about tracking employees' time, which is different.
But it will do the same thing. Because you can, when you track somebody's time and say, I did 10 hours worth of capital this week, 2 hours was on project A, 3 hours was on project B, you can tie that right back to how much a person makes an hour.
Well, yeah, you can come up with a
bit.
cost for that, but I guess then my question is it worth shifting that revenue around?
Well, that's a different,
Yeah.
that's a different.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is
Yeah.
it's a different animal. I think the data that you're suggesting I think has some value.
Do you remember, and this is back a few boards ago, and I'm trying to think of whether that municipal performance measuring program was part of the Tom and,
That was before my time, because I remember
But
Bill Chapman wanted to get rid of it.
but that had everything I think that Jeff was talking about, where you're tracking your time during the day to justify
Yeah,
the mean, so to speak.
and that was just before my time.
We're not talking about 15-minute intervals here.
No.
No.
Right, I see what you're saying. You tie, if we're picking off those big ticket items,
For example, if you've got 3 people that spent all week doing something in the harbor.
right,
You'd probably ought to ask, what are you doing in the harbor? And should that be contracted out, or did that take 3 times longer than something else? And
Because that actually
where's it
doesn't,
going?
that doesn't reflect the true cost of the harbor if you're,
Right, okay.
Right.
Well, let me
me
think
type-
about it a little bit and see,
I jotted myself a note.
do you want to bring this back for further discussion next month, or?
Yes, we do.
All right, let me work on it. I'll take the charge to work on this a little bit and
I-
maybe come up with a plan that,
I don't want to revert back, but I would be really interested to know what Bill might think of that TIF usage. I would just want to bring that up again to,
on the streetlights?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
because if we can get that going sooner rather than later. I like the idea of the light.
Well, I think
I don't
that-
want to revert back to that away from this, but while I was thinking about it.
But I think that the thought was that if we decide to do this, that the annual expense that we currently pay wouldn't change. We'd pay it off in 3 or 4 years or whatever. We wouldn't see any savings until the 3rd or 4th year, but we wouldn't see an increase either. But you're right, if there's a way to subsidize it a little bit, it'll just make that payoff a little bit shorter.
But keeping in mind that there's limited money coming in the TIF and.
Right now there is. It may be that, if the hotel gets built down here and that TIF gets
Yeah.
flooded with money in the next couple of years, that we could, advance that payment in year 2 or year 3.
It would work on the streetlights in what was designated as the downtown.
Right, it has to be
TIF.
in the district.
Right, but it wouldn't work out on
No, the Route 1 is only for sewer,
You could afford to put in the 4,000 K lights.
if we wanted them. I don't
That'll
think
make people happy.
I don't think they're any more expensive, though, are
No,
they?
they're not, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd mix.
Okay, I don't think we have
Should we
anything else.
quickly, probably should do it in public, meeting layout here for the next couple of weeks? I mean, it's getting confusing.
Yeah. Well, we have a meeting on the schedule for the 25th.
And the purpose of that meeting
25th.
is,
The purpose of that meeting right now, and I don't know whether it's still gonna be the purpose of that meeting, was to talk about library parking issues. There was a request from 3 board members to have a meeting later this week to talk also about that issue, in particular with the timing of the bid. And
that discussion would be more around timing of bid and what to submit, not a discussion around options.
Right, that's my
That-
assumption.
that's what we have to
probably
be
not,
careful
but I
of.
think it's a tough one because some of the, because we had a meeting with a subset of the design team earlier today, and some of the options that are considered do play into that decision.
So should we have the public meeting and discussions earlier than?
Well, I think what we may end up having to do is to have a
Have a couple
two-part,
of meetings.
have a two-part situation, and I gotta work on the agenda a little bit, and maybe have a meeting later this week when everybody thinks we can get together. Or, like I said, I think we could do it next Monday and still meet our goal of being able to deal with the bid before it's gonna go out. But I think what we might end up having to do is to have the meeting where there is gonna be, yes, there will be some discussion of options, because it does, you can't talk about the bid without talking about the options. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, but I think that if you're talking about options in relationship to what would cause us to slow down in the bid and what wouldn't.
We're not gonna make
what-
decisions
then
about options, yeah.
You were right,
Yeah.
as opposed to the pros and cons of options.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly,
the pros
yeah.
and cons of options and public input is something that I think we're talking about the
That'll-
25th
yeah,
at
the
least.
25th
we were
or maybe
talking
even
about.
later.
Yeah, but the options play into.
But I think we have
the
some
discussion.
process questions we have to answer and some other things. So I don't want to say that this first meeting would be only about that, because I think the options do play into it.
I'm just trying to get a sense for which one we want to encourage the maximum amount of public
I
participation
think people are,
input.
I think
they
people are
gotta
gonna,
go to all
they're
of
gonna
them.
show up to all of them, I think.
Okay, so we ought to be flexible and think we've got 2 meetings to cover this, and
I think that's,
I said it, I'd like to see us go with this Thursday to get started. That leaves us all next week to, we could have another meeting next week if we had it to, before our 25th meeting, which I assume is when we're gonna sort of
is
make the
Thursday okay
decision.
for everybody?
the problem is, this week, I sent you a note that said I'm good at 7 o'clock,
7 o'clock on Thursday?
Yeah, I'm
Because
fine.
you have a.
because I've got the town manager.
Yeah.
Right, and we can delay a
Thursday.
little later if you think that's gonna take a little longer.
We'll-
Okay. Mark, are you okay with Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me work on an agenda and get it out.
We need to, if we expect or we anticipate public
Yeah, we have to get
conversation,
the number.
we gotta get it out soon
Yep.
and get it widespread.
Yeah, I
And we
will-
also ought to make a point of it, that really it's this meeting and the meeting on the 25th are very similar,
Right,
correct?
I think so, and like I said, I gotta think about it a little bit, and,
But there's definitely a meeting Thursday at 7 PM, is that
I
right?
think so, yeah. And I did talk to Will Gartley this afternoon, and I sent everybody an email saying he had said he could not be there. He told me today that his commitment is not ironclad. I mean,
Oh.
he's not gonna have any flexibility. It's either gonna happen or it's not gonna happen. But
Oh.
there's a chance that with the other meeting that he has to attend may not occur, and if that
Oh.
happens, he would be able to be here.
Right.
But,
But in any case, Vi's gonna be here, right? So.
yes.
Yeah,
yeah,
Charlie
he'll
will be here.
Okay.
Okay.
Probably Bettina too, I would think.
Well, that's Phi, I think it's.
Yeah.
Liaison reports.
Oh.
Well, I'll kick off, because it's, I want to say about the ambulance review committee, because it said in Rick's documentation that I'm working with Mark Ratner, and I have to do that. I haven't done it yet. I just got Mark's phone number late last week, and then I was away over the weekend, but we're going to try to get that scheduled sometime in the second half of this month. We're behind as far as signing the contract renewal. We have to do it, but I think all the managers have agreed that the contract will be renewed. They've agreed to renew the contract at the same rate as last year, so it's just a matter of getting that done.
And when we have all the stakeholders in the same room, we iron out dates, because that's been a little.
Yeah, you're right.
That's been a bugaboo with,
Well, we've tried it, and then they end up,
well,
we set dates, and then they end up sliding, but I think you're right, we should set a fixed time that meeting is gonna occur quarterly, and, whether it's the third Thursday or the first,
that
whatever it
way,
is.
there's
yeah.
no,
This is when the meeting is gonna be,
Right.
and that's the end of it, unless we have a, disaster or something. ORC has been meeting for the last couple of weeks. Deborah came last week as we try to get her infused in that, and there's been some discussion about the short-term rentals. There's a realization there that that's not gonna be something that's gonna be ready for prime time in June, but there's been some productive discussion. There's a lot of issues surrounding it, and I think the select board realized early on that we'd have to have some public meetings on that topic. They dispensed with some of the boilerplate stuff. The marijuana ordinance, which was fairly boilerplate, was taken care of pretty quickly. They are next week going to be looking at regulations that are currently in the land use ordinance for piers. The harbor master's going to come in, and the chair of the harbor committee too, I believe, to talk to the ORC about that and see what we need to do there. And the aquaculture definition came up last week as well. So, but those are still things that are in progress. Cemetery has not met. Legacy Rockport, I don't think has met since the last time we did. And I think I'm done.
I can go next, before I forget, mostly. Harbor Committee met last Thursday night. I was not able to go. I don't have an update on that. Capital Improvement Committee, we looked at the list of capital as it currently stands, last week during the Budget Committee. I'm not sure when that meeting is going to, or that committee is going to meet again. The Parks Committee has asked me, apparently at one time we made an exception or two in terms of membership on the Parks Committee by having non-residents be a part of that committee. One of them was a person that worked in Penn Bay. And the question was, would the board be, and I'm not asking for yes or no, but the question was I believe one of these people is going to be done, that committee, at some point soon. And the question was, would the select board entertain another exception type request if it so worked out that the right committee member might happen not to be a Rockport resident?
And in general, I think in the past on that, what we've done is said that if somebody brings some expertise to the committee and has an interest in Rockport, that we're fine with it. My personal issue is that I never want to see a majority of committee members be non-Rockport residents. But on a case-by-case basis, in my opinion, yes.
Okay, they asked, I mean, they certainly didn't take it for granted by any stretch.
No.
They asked, there's no path forward currently, but.
But it lets them know
want
who they can.
Right,
perhaps-
so what I said was, bring it to us by exception.
Right.
Yeah.
The one with it was recreation that the hospital had, their community.
I'm sorry, the rec.
Yeah,
yes.
their community health person.
I'm getting tired.
Was on the rec committee.
Yeah, right, it's the
And
rec.
it may be, there could be somebody out there that is in the landscaping business, groundskeeping,
Yeah.
you know, business that would bring expertise to to the Parks Committee.
Right.
that
Yeah.
it would.
My
that would make
apologies,
sense.
it is the rec committee.
Yeah, but-
but
I made a
I
grave
was gonna
error
say,
there.
I didn't see you there.
But it
No,
was, it has, they have done that in the past, and it has worked out pretty effectively in the
I
past.
think we have somebody in the Opera House committee, too.
Yes, yeah, he's from Camden,
Chris
yeah.
Basil from
Yes.
Camden, because he has some expertise to bring. But, yeah, in general, the advisory committees, we can do that with.
Okay, so I'll
And the quasi judicial, obviously, we can't.
make sure they get that back.
So speaking of parks, I'm going to segue into that. I did convey to Dave about the benches being put in the budget. He was very thankful to Doug and I for plugging it in there. And there's not much else to go on to that, but I suspect there might be some message coming from them with regards to their opinions of what should happen up the street. And they certainly, the Parks Committee people, ought to be emailed so that they'll have an opportunity on the 11th, whatever day it is we've got coming up. Conservation Commission has been busy little beavers. Their latest and hopefully last draw at the bylaws will be done. And they'll have that into us by the end of the month. So, long time coming, but they're pretty energetic.
And I did have an email from Kim about plastic bag ordinance.
Yeah.
And there was another one that came in today.
Yeah, I forgot what it was.
But I'll put those on in April for the board to look at, and
Yeah.
it's too late to get them on in the ballot in June at this point, but certainly we can look at that. Surrounding towns have done it. Plastic bag, there was another one, but I can't think of what it was.
I
off the top of my
remember
head. Pardon me?
another one too.
So I'll put those on for April.
Yep, I can't find it.
Midcoast. Midcoast Solid Waste. They did appoint a governance committee, and I'm on it, along with a representative from every town. I think the most important thing to report is that Allison McKellar has, as the chair of the finance committee, she took issue with the audit and the suggestion that we were so sorely underfunded for the closing of the landfill. And they've spent a lot of time, she has spent a lot of time with the auditors, and I think that they're getting down to the point where there is agreement that the auditors had not, and Rick, correct me if I have anything incorrect here, but that there is agreement that they had not counted that money that was returned to us. to the 4 towns. And when, you know, when that is counted, then it's a very different situation. We may still not have really sufficient funding, but we're not, you know, we're not as bad off as was suggested by the auditors. So I've requested at the last meeting to, for all of the towns to indicate if there is anything that they need to be done in terms of policies, you know, through the governance committee or the finance committee, in order to return those funds. And I think that pretty much all the towns felt that there wasn't any particular, they felt that, you know, we're on the right road of a better organization, I guess, or better control.
Have all the towns agreed to do that? Because I thought there was some disagreement among some
Yeah,
of the
well, that's
towns.
just it. I think that not Camden and Rockport, but the other two seem to, you know, maybe not have agreement to do that, but yet Lincolnville and Hope both thought that that there really probably wasn't any policy at this point standing in the way. So we'll need to do some kind of motion, or I don't know, we had to figure out exactly what the next step forward is to
Was
actually
there some
make it
discussion
happen.
about getting a clearer policy so that when that money does get transferred over, that it is restricted to
Yes.
strictly,
Yes,
We
right.
had
Which
a
that was-
warrant article on town
Right.
meeting a
Right.
couple years ago, I think.
that allowed us
addressed-
to do it, yeah.
That addressed that,
Yeah.
I thought. but-
So anyway, we're gonna have to come up with, you know, the actual mechanics and as Rick said, that assurance, but it looks
That's
like
their
we're
big
headed
fear,
that
is
direction.
that there is some sort of policy in place that isolates that money and
Right.
restricts it, so it can only be used for the closure fund.
Right, right.
Okay, anybody else?
Well, yeah, I've got mine here. Keep Rockport Beautiful Committee or Rockport Beautification Committee has not met recently, but I expect they'll be ramping up as the weather improves, and Gretchen Leone is now back in town. Planning Board has not had a meeting. The Finance Committee, with Jared Cronkite's blessing, I got together last Saturday with Mark Agnon and Kevin Olenek. They're both Rockport residents. Mark is the chief medical officer at Penn Bay, so he's up in the administrative level. And Kevin is on the Knox County Free Clinic board. And we got together to just sort of take a first pass at talking about the Weidman Healthcare Trust. And we spent the time reviewing sort of the history of the trust, how we got to where we are today. And we feel like the next step is going to be to meet with our general assistance people. I bumped into Diane today on our way to lunch and sort of explained that to her, and she said she'd be happy to get together with us. And our goal here is in a fairly short time to make a recommendation on how the Weidman Trust can best be used to the Finance Committee, and then the Finance Committee to make that recommendation to the Select Board. So, stay tuned. That's it.
Okay,
I move we move into, adjourn this meeting and go into executive session or something.
Or something.
As soon as the cards are signed.
Yeah,
I'll vote on it in a
move
minute.
we go into executive session for discussion of a personnel matter pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 405-6A.
is there a second?
Second?
At 9:29.
All in favor? Okay, Mark? Thank you. Okay. And this, I think, will be extremely brief.
Considering what happened with the Knox County Commissioners, I think we should.
Yeah,
adjourn
we'll
to
go in the other
green
room.